My name's Nate, I'm 32, and until recently, I was what you'd call the glue of the family, the organizer, the peacemaker, the wallet. Every year, I planned our annual family trip meticulously. I'd scout out the best deals, book the house, build the grocery list, and share a full schedule in our group chat weeks ahead of time. It wasn't just about the trip, it was my way of holding everyone together, of keeping that flicker of connection alive even when the rest of the year was full of one-word replies and seen messages. But this year hit different. It started small, like most things do. A missed reply here, a vague, "we'll see" from my brother Tyler when I sent out the dates. My mom said she wasn't sure if she could make it, and my sister Lacey just heart-reacted the message, no actual response. Still, I figured they were just busy. That once they saw the house I found, 3 bedrooms, oceanfront, fully stocked kitchen, deck with a view, they'd rally. I even went early that Friday morning, picked up groceries for everyone's dietary preferences, Tyler's keto phase, Lacey's gluten-free obsession, Mom's almond milk, and chilled the wine they liked. I sent a photo in the group chat when I arrived. We're all set. Can't wait to see everyone. No response. Not for an hour. Not for 2. Then, as I was unpacking the last grocery bag, I got a ping. Tyler had posted on Facebook. A picture of a cozy-looking cabin tucked in the woods, everyone smiling in flannel. Mom, Dad, Lacey, even Lacey's boyfriend I barely knew. The caption read, "Family weekend. So lucky to spend it with the people who matter most." My phone slipped from my hand onto the kitchen counter. I just stood there. You know that feeling when you've walked into a room expecting laughter, expecting love, and instead you get silence? That kind of quiet that's so loud it makes your teeth ache? That was me in that moment. Surrounded by a stocked fridge, an itinerary I'd spent weeks refining, extra towels folded for guests who'd never arrive. No one had said a word. No change of plans. No, "Hey, we're doing something else this year." They just cut me out. And it wasn't the first time. Not really. There'd been signs. Like when they forgot to loop me in on Thanksgiving plans 2 years ago and claimed it was a last-minute thing. Or how they always managed to schedule family game nights on days I had work travel, then posted about how perfect the whole family was together. I told myself they were just unorganized, that they didn't mean to leave me out. But you can only pretend so long before the truth punches through the excuses. That night, I sat on the deck staring at the waves, phone dark, heart heavier than I expected. I wasn't sad exactly. I was numb and tired. Tired of being the one who always tried, always gave, always made it easy for them to treat me like an optional extra. The guy who funded Christmas gifts for the kids. The one who covered the Airbnb last year when no one could afford to split. The one whose Netflix account had 5 profiles, none of them his. And in that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just made a decision. The next morning, I brewed a full pot of coffee, poured 1 cup, and sat down at the kitchen table. I opened my laptop and typed up a receipt, itemized, calm, professional. The cost of the house, the groceries, the supplies, even the welcome basket I'd put together with local soaps and treats. I attached it to a group email. Subject line, "This year's trip, costs recap." No message, just the total and a gentle reminder to Venmo me by the end of the week. Then I opened my phone. Netflix. Log out of all devices. Change password. Disney Plus. Remove all profiles. Change email. Spotify family plan. Canceled. Amazon Prime. Removed household members. My credit card. Disconnected from everyone's Apple Pay. Even the emergency card I'd given Mom, just in case. Gone. Then I logged into the Family Emergency Fund, a savings account I'd quietly been the main contributor to for the past 6 years. Birthday money, side hustle checks, bonuses. Tyler had dipped into it for his car repair last spring. Lacey used it for rent when her internship didn't pan out. I moved the entire balance, every cent, into a new high-yield account in my name. And I left a sticky note on the old shared accounts dashboard. Please contact the new account holder directly for access. Love, the guy who wasn't invited. The phone call started around noon. First, a text from Mom. "Hey, can we talk?" Then Lacey. "Why is the Disney Plus not working?" By evening, Tyler had tried calling twice. No voicemail, just hang-ups. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't in fixer mode. I wasn't trying to smooth it over, to keep the peace, to make it easy for them to walk all over me. I was letting the silence speak, letting the absence of my generosity ring louder than any words I could have said. And then something unexpected happened. A knock on the beach house door. That's when I got up, slowly, heartbeat rising, and checked the peephole. It was my mom. She stood there awkwardly, arms folded like she wasn't sure if she should knock again. Her expression wasn't quite guilt. Not yet. It was the sort of look people wear when they expect you to apologize first. Like you overreacted. Like you were the one being dramatic. I opened the door slowly but didn't move to let her in. Just leaned against the frame and waited. She cleared her throat. "Hey, Nate." Her voice was soft, like she was trying out a tone she hadn't used in years. "Mind if I come in?" I didn't say anything. Just raised an eyebrow and sipped the coffee in my hand, now cold. She fidgeted. "We didn't think you'd be up here already. I mean, we figured, after last year, you might not even want to plan the trip again." So that was going to be the excuse. I finally spoke, voice calm. "I sent the schedule 3 weeks ago. You all heart reacted. No one said anything about a change." She looked down. "Well, Tyler found that cabin and everyone was excited. It just kind of happened. I thought he told you." I laughed. "Just once." Sharp. "So now we're pretending Tyler was the messenger?" She looked up, flushed. "Look, I'm not here to argue. People are upset. You changed all the accounts, and that emergency fund, Tyler said you took the whole thing. He's panicking. Lacey can't log into anything. And your dad was trying to order his meds, but the Amazon account." I held up a hand. "I didn't take anything. I moved my money. I shut down my subscriptions. And if the family emergency fund is such a lifeline, maybe someone else should have been contributing to it for once." She blinked. "That's not fair." "No," I said, louder now. "What's not fair is me spending thousands every year for people who treat me like the help. What's not fair is being left out of your so-called family weekend and finding out through a Facebook post. What's not fair is being expected to foot the bill and smile through it." She was quiet for a long moment. The waves behind her kept rolling in, calm and endless. I watched her chew her lip like she wanted to say something that would fix everything with one sentence, some magic apology that didn't exist. "Instead," she said, "Tyler didn't mean to exclude you. Then he shouldn't have." More silence. Finally, she asked, "What do you want, Nate?" "Really?" And for the first time in a long while, I knew the answer. "I want to not be the afterthought. I want someone else to pick up the slack. I want you to notice when I'm not there, instead of conveniently forgetting. I want a family that doesn't just use me when it's convenient." Her face twisted, just a little. "We don't use you." "Really?" I said. "Who booked the Airbnb last year? Who paid for groceries when you said money was tight? Who covered the Christmas gifts when Lacey's card got declined? Who bought your anniversary dinner when Dad forgot the reservation?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I stepped back just enough to close the door gently between us. She didn't knock again. That night, I walked the beach alone under a heavy sky. My thoughts were a mess: regret, relief, sadness, freedom. Part of me wanted them to show up tomorrow with apologies and promises. Part of me wanted them to leave me alone for good. But the strongest part of me, the part that had been silent for too long, was just done. Done being the backup plan. Done being the bank. Done being invisible. The next day, Tyler called. 3 times. Then Lacey. Then Mom again. I didn't answer. But then, an unknown number rang. I picked it up without thinking, expecting a telemarketer. It wasn't. It was someone I hadn't heard from in almost 2 years. And the second I heard his voice, I realized everything I thought I knew about this family trip was about to unravel even more than I expected. Because apparently, I wasn't the only one they'd left out. And he wasn't staying quiet either. "Hey, Nate. It's Caleb." I hadn't heard that name in a while. My cousin Caleb and I used to be close growing up. We were the only two in the family who understood what it was like to be sidelined, spoken over, and quietly expected to sacrifice our time, money, or plans for the good of the group. But a couple years back, he started pulling away. Didn't show up for Thanksgiving. Skipped my mom's birthday dinner. I figured life had just gotten in the way. But now, hearing his voice, my gut told me something else had been going on. "Caleb," I said cautiously, "it's been a minute." "Yeah, sorry to drop in like this," he said, his voice a mix of irritation and nervous energy. "But I saw that picture Tyler posted. The cabin. The so-called family weekend. I'm guessing you weren't invited either." I leaned against the counter, heart picking up. Nope. I was sitting in a fully stocked beach house waiting for people who never planned to show up. He muttered something under his breath. Same here. Not the beach house part, but I offered to host this year. You know I've got the space. I brought it up months ago, and your mom said it was a nice idea, but she wasn't sure they'd do the trip at all. I froze. Wait, so you were told there might not be a trip? He let out a dry laugh. Yup. I thought maybe it was just the usual flakiness. Then I saw the post. Them all grinning like nothing was wrong. And I realized they're not just forgetful. They're excluding people on purpose. I felt something tighten in my chest. Caleb had always been a little more blunt than me. Where I tried to give people the benefit of the doubt, he saw the cracks early. But hearing him say it out loud, that this wasn't an accident, that they'd not only cut me out, but him too, I thought maybe I did something wrong, I admitted. I've been trying to hold things together for so long that I didn't even see it coming. He was quiet for a beat. No, man, you didn't mess up. They just decided you weren't useful enough anymore. Or worse, that you'd stopped being easy to control. That hit harder than I expected. I thought about all the times I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. All the quiet sacrifices. The favors. The ignored birthdays. The one-sided group chats. I remembered how they treated Caleb too. How they called him moody when he didn't laugh at Tyler's jokes, or difficult when he questioned how the family money was spent. Maybe we'd both been too quiet for too long. I did something. I said slowly, almost testing the words as I spoke them. After I saw the post, I shut it all down. The subscriptions, the cards, the emergency fund. Caleb gave a low whistle. Damn, good for you. I didn't do it out of spite, I added. I did it because I finally saw how little they valued me when I wasn't footing the bill. You don't have to explain yourself to me, he said. Honestly, I've been waiting for someone to finally stop pretending everything's okay. They've been cutting people out one by one. Me, you, even Aunt Marie. You know they didn't invite her to Thanksgiving last year? And when she called to ask why, your mom told her, we just assumed you'd be too tired. I sank into the kitchen chair, reeling. Aunt Marie was in her 60s and had always been the one to bring the pies, decorate the house, and write birthday cards by hand. If they could do that to her, they're shrinking the circle, Caleb said darkly, down to the people who don't challenge them, who make them feel superior, who don't rock the boat. I swallowed hard. Well, they forgot one thing. What's that? I own the boat. That made Caleb laugh. You've still got that beach house until Sunday? Yeah. What? He paused for just a second. I'm 2 hours away. You up for company? I didn't even hesitate. Absolutely. 2 hours later, he showed up with a cooler of drinks, a stack of board games, and a grin that hadn't changed since high school. For the first time all weekend, I felt like I wasn't alone. We sat on the deck watching the sunset bleed across the ocean, letting the silence say everything that didn't need to be spoken out loud. But inside, I could feel something shifting. I wasn't just done with how they treated me. I was ready to rewrite the story. And apparently, I wasn't the only one. Because the next morning, something new appeared in the family group chat. A screenshot. From Lacey. The caption read, "So, who told Caleb and Nate they weren't invited?" And underneath it, a single word reply from my dad. Wasn't my call. I stared at the message on my phone, watching the dots bounce under Lacey's name like they were trying to drum up the nerve to finish a sentence that could crack the whole thing open. The next message came a minute later. Seriously, this isn't okay. Did anyone even think to tell them? Silence. Then my mom finally replied. We didn't want drama. Things have been tense with Nate for a while. And Caleb, well, he made it clear he didn't really want to be part of things anymore. I let out a quiet breath. There it was. Not a real apology. Just the kind of sanitized, passive-aggressive explanation that sounds reasonable until you remember the context, until you remember you were the one standing in a fully stocked beach house while your family laughed in a cabin without you. Caleb leaned over to look at the screen. Classic, he muttered. Throw a little vague shade and hope everyone just nods along. But Lacey, for all her flaws, surprised me. Tense? You mean when he paid for everything last year and you didn't even say thank you? Or when he bought the gifts, covered the Airbnb, set up the schedules, and you all made fun of him for being too organized? My dad replied next, which was even more surprising. Let's not act like this wasn't planned. We excluded Nate. And Caleb. It was a group decision. Don't rewrite it now. My hands clenched around my coffee cup. Not just because he admitted it, but because of how cold it was. How factual. Like they'd held a family meeting and decided the two of us no longer fit the aesthetic. And for what? For being stable? For not needing handouts? For not pretending everything was perfect just to keep up appearances? Caleb looked at me. He just owned it. Yeah. So what now? That question hit different now that I wasn't alone. I'd spent the past year holding on to some idealized version of my family, thinking if I did just enough, gave just enough, tolerated just enough, they'd see me, maybe even appreciate me. But the truth was, they saw me just fine. They just didn't think I'd ever push back. That night, I typed a message in the family group chat. Thanks for the clarity. I'm glad to know where I stand. For years, I've gone out of my way to support all of you, financially, emotionally, practically. But this past weekend made something very clear. None of that was ever about family for you. It was about convenience. You took from me because I let you. That ends now. I paused, then added one last line. I won't be attending any more family events. If you ever want to talk, really talk, you know how to find me. Until then, don't. I hit send and put my phone face down on the counter. Caleb gave a small nod, like he knew that wasn't easy. Feels like we should toast or something. I laughed. To what? Exile. To freedom, he said, raising his glass. We clinked bottles, and for once, I didn't feel bitter. I felt calm. Free in a way I hadn't been since I was a kid trying to earn gold stars from parents who only handed them out when it made them look good in public. The days after that were quiet. I kept the beach house for the rest of the week. Caleb stayed for 2 nights before heading back home, but he left behind a stack of old board games we used to play together. I spent a lot of time walking the beach, clearing out the mental fog of years spent chasing scraps of validation from people who were never going to offer more. Lacey called once. I didn't pick up, but she left a voicemail. Said she was sorry. Said she didn't realize how deep the cuts had gone. That she went along with things because it was easier than arguing. I appreciated the honesty, but I didn't call back. Because at some point, even apologies can't rebuild what's been torn down by 1,000 tiny cuts and one final, brutal silence. A week later, I met with my banker and officially closed the old joint account. Moved everything under a new umbrella of mine. I canceled my part of the family phone plan. I got a new number. I rekeyed my locks. I pulled back, not in anger, but in peace. The truth is, cutting someone off isn't always about hate. Sometimes, it's about survival. About no longer twisting yourself into a shape that fits someone else's comfort zone. About choosing yourself. That Christmas, I stayed home. I cooked a meal just for me. Opened a book I hadn't touched in years. Watched the snow fall outside my window in silence. And in that silence, I didn't feel lonely. I felt whole. That night, I posted a photo of my simple little dinner, my fireplace glowing, my dog curled at my feet. The caption just said, Merry Christmas, from someone who finally chose peace. It got more likes than any family photo I'd ever been tagged in. A few months later, I got an unexpected invitation. A wedding. Not from anyone in the core family, but from Aunt Marie's oldest daughter, Emily. Someone who'd been quietly watching the whole thing unfold. Her handwritten note said, You've always made the effort. I see that now. I'd be honored if you came. And that was the start of something new. Smaller, maybe, but real. A few of the forgotten ones, the quietly exiled, the ones who stopped showing up because they were tired of pretending, started finding each other again. We had dinner at Caleb's place that spring. I brought wine. Emily brought her new fiancé. Aunt Marie brought pie. No one asked who paid for what. No one demanded anything. We just talked. We laughed. We listened. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a background character in someone else's narrative. I felt like I belonged. Not because I had bought my place at the table, but because I'd finally built a table of my own. And this time, only the ones who saw my worth without a receipt were welcome to sit down. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. My name's Aiden. I'm 32, single, no kids, and apparently, according to my family, the helper type, not the heir, not the legacy, not the golden child, just the guy who keeps the lights on. It all really began unraveling last Sunday. The whole family was gathered at my parents' place for dinner. The same mismatched chairs around the table, the same overcooked roast chicken, the same way they always acted like I'd just be there, quiet, predictable, dependable. My brother, Caleb, was in fine form as usual. Loud, full of himself, spinning some story about how hard it was to get time off from the firm, even though everyone knew he worked remote and took more vacations than meetings. But still, my parents hung on every word like he was the second coming of Elon Musk. We were halfway through dessert, store-bought pie, my treat, of course, when my dad casually leaned back in his chair, wiped his mouth with a paper napkin, and said, By the way, we updated the will last week. Everything's going to Caleb. Just like that. No lead up, no explanation. Like he was mentioning the weather. I blinked. Everything. Dad nodded. It just makes sense. He's the one carrying the family name. You're not married. No kids. You understand. I stared at him. Then at my mom. She didn't look up from her plate. Just nodded and said, "You've always been more of a helper than a real heir, sweetheart. You're great with details. That's your strength." There was no malice in her voice. Just that breezy, matter-of-fact tone that people use when they're explaining why your job got outsourced. I felt like I wasn't even at the table anymore, like I was just some background staffer, taking notes at a board meeting about my own life. Nobody mentioned how I'd quietly stepped in last month to cover their mortgage payment when they were between checks. Nobody brought up the $2,000 I dropped on repairs when Caleb's transmission blew out and he forgot his wallet. Or the way I've been paying their car insurance every month for over a year now, because it's just temporary. Aiden, you know how tight things are right now. I didn't say anything. I just smiled, nodded, asked if anyone wanted more pie. That night, I went home and opened every account I'd ever connected to their lives. Mortgage autopay? Canceled. Insurance? Disabled. Caleb's shared Spotify family plan that I paid for and he never even thanked me for? Gone. I even pulled my name from the joint emergency fund I started after Mom's health scare. Something she said gave her peace of mind. By Tuesday, I got a text from Mom. Did the payment bounce? The bank called. I ignored it. Wednesday, another one from Caleb. Dude, did you cancel the car insurance? Still ignored it. Thursday, my dad sent an email with the subject line, important, and no greeting. Just a screenshot of their overdue electric bill and a note that said, "This needs to be handled ASAP." By Friday morning, Caleb called me 3 times. Then texted, "Power's out. Dad's losing it. You better answer." I didn't. Not out of spite. Not entirely, anyway. See, for most of my life, I didn't mind being the helper. I liked making things easier for the people I loved. I was good at handling problems, staying calm, thinking ahead. But somewhere along the line, that turned into being invisible, into being expected. They leaned on me so hard they forgot I was a person, forgot I had limits, that I could get tired too. And when I finally heard what they really thought, that I was just the supporting character in their Golden Boys legacy, it was like something cracked clean open inside me. Not anger, not at first. Just this eerie calm. The kind you get before a storm. Like realizing you've been holding your breath for 10 years and finally letting it out. So no, I didn't pick up. I let the silence speak for me. And by the time Saturday rolled around, they weren't just trying to reach me, they were scrambling. That morning, I got a message from my aunt, one of the few relatives who actually treats me like a person. "Just got off the phone with your mom. She's in tears. What's going on over there?" I didn't respond to my aunt's message. Not because I didn't like her, she's always been decent to me, but because I knew how fast word would spread once I said anything. And I wasn't ready yet. Not until everything had landed. Saturday afternoon, I went to the gym like I always did. Routine. Normal. Except my phone was vibrating nonstop in the locker. 8 missed calls. 14 texts. Most of them from Caleb, and the tone had shifted from demanding to panicked. "You need to fix this," he wrote. "Dad says we're gonna lose the house insurance if the payment doesn't clear by Monday. What are you trying to do, man?" There it was. Not "can we talk" or "I'm sorry." Just more commands. Still treating me like the family IT department, financial advisor, and janitor rolled into one. I showered. I left my phone on Do Not Disturb. And I went to sleep early. Sunday morning, I took my time. Made coffee. Cleaned the apartment. I even watered the plants on the balcony. I didn't check my messages until noon, and when I finally opened my phone, it was worse than I expected. Apparently, the insurance company had officially flagged them for non-payment. They were on the hook for late fees on the mortgage. The power was still off because they hadn't paid the past due amount in full. Caleb's car had been towed over unpaid tickets he never mentioned to me, because, surprise, I was the one who used to keep track of those too. And the kicker? My dad called me. Called, not texted. Which meant things were officially falling apart. I let it ring out. Then he left a voicemail. "Aiden, I don't know what's going on, but your mother is upset, and I don't have time for whatever game you're playing. This is your family. You're being selfish, and frankly, it's disappointing. You need to step up and fix this." I just stared at my phone. That tone. That same condescending tone I've heard since I was a teenager. Like I was being difficult for asking to be included. Like I was always one notch below Caleb because he played sports and dated cheerleaders and eventually slapped his name on a company that someone else built. And then it hit me. He didn't even see me. He didn't say what happened, or can we talk? He didn't ask why I was hurting. Just told me to fix what I broke. Like I was the power grid. Like I was the one malfunctioning. I saved the voicemail, not to hold it over him, just as a reminder. Because in that moment, something inside me settled. This wasn't going to be a quick revenge story. This was going to be a complete reset. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want a seat at their table anymore. I was building my own, but I wanted them to feel the gap I left behind. To finally understand that the helper was the foundation. That all the things they took for granted, every silent solution, every quietly covered bill, every fixed problem before it reached them, came from me. And now, it was gone. Sunday evening, I got a text from my mom. "I don't know what's happening, but your father is furious and Caleb is stressed. Please just tell me what this is about." I typed out a message, paused, deleted it. Instead, I sent a screenshot of the will update email Caleb forwarded to me months ago when he thought it was funny. His message back then had just said, "LOL, guess I win." I sent that screenshot with no caption. Then I turned off my phone. On Monday, the real fallout started. Their internet provider removed service for non-payment. Caleb's company credit card was declined while trying to book a flight. My mom called me again. I let it ring. I knew what was coming next. A house of cards only looks stable until the wind hits it. And I was done being the glue. But I wasn't done yet. Because while they were busy putting out fires, they hadn't even realized the biggest one was still on the way. It had to do with the house, the deed, and a quiet little detail they never paid attention to because they assumed the helper didn't read the fine print. But I always did. Always. And now? They were going to learn what it felt like to be left out. The house they lived in, the one I'd bailed out more times than I could count, had a history. It was my grandparents' house, originally. When they passed, my dad inherited it, but at the time, they were drowning in medical debt and had maxed out almost every credit line they had just keeping afloat. I was 25 when I stepped in. I just landed my first real job with a salary that felt enormous at the time. I didn't hesitate. I offered to help refinance the house under better terms. What they didn't realize, or maybe they did and just forgot, was that when we finalized the deal, I became a partial owner. Not a co-signer. Not a guarantor. A co-owner. They were so relieved, so grateful, when I showed up with my suit jacket and pen at the closing table. My dad even clapped me on the back and said, "Look at our responsible one, always coming through." And then they never brought it up again. It just became another quiet task Aiden had handled. Another emergency smoothed over, forgotten like a fire that never scorched the floor. But I didn't forget. And while they were frantically texting me about insurance bills and Caleb's frozen accounts, I was sitting in my office rereading the deed, scanning it like I'd done so many times over the years. My name was still there, legally binding, undeniable. And the best part? Because of the way it was filed, any major decisions, like refinancing again, or selling, or even taking out an equity loan, required my signature, which meant the home they just assumed Caleb would inherit one day, the one they'd basically claimed belonged to the real heir, it wasn't fully theirs to give. I didn't act on it right away. Instead, I waited for the next dinner invite. Sure enough, it came Thursday night from Mom. "Dinner this Sunday? Just us. We want to talk." No apology. No mention of the will. Just, "We want to talk." Like I was a wayward employee being summoned for a performance review. I showed up, not out of obligation, but to watch it all play out in person. The house was dim, still no proper lighting in half the rooms. A dusty lamp on the hallway table flickered. The air was stuffy, probably because they hadn't had working AC all week. When Mom opened the door, she forced a smile. Dad nodded at me like we were negotiating a ceasefire. Caleb was already seated at the table, arms crossed, face tight. I sat across from him, calm. Dinner was rushed. Pasta with Jared sauce, barely warm. No one asked how I was doing. No one thanked me for coming. They just danced around the tension like it wasn't sitting right there between the breadsticks and the Parmesan shaker. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Listen, we've had a rough week, obviously. And it's become clear that there's been some miscommunication." Caleb snorted. "Yeah, like how you went nuclear because of a will, Aiden." "Seriously." I tilted my head. "You mean the one that cuts me out of everything? That will." Dad held up a hand like he was trying to play mediator. "No one's cutting you out of anything. That was a draft. We just hadn't gotten around to discussing it with you." I gave a small laugh. You discussed it just fine. At dinner. Right after pie. Silence. Mom finally jumped in. Sweetheart, we just met. You don't have children. You're not married. We assumed Caleb would need the support more long term. Oh, I said, voice even. So my role is just to support. Keep the lights on, fix things, disappear quietly. No one said that, Dad muttered. You did, I replied. And for the record, this house? It's not just yours. They froze. Caleb blinked. What? I pulled a folded copy of the deed from my jacket pocket, placed it on the table. You might want to read the fine print. My mom reached for it with trembling fingers. My dad leaned in. Caleb didn't touch it, just looked between us like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I've been paying for this place since I was 25, I said. I refinanced it to save you from foreclosure. I didn't ask for credit, but I am a legal owner, which means if you want to sell it, borrow against it, even transfer it, you need my consent. Still no one spoke. So I kept going. And since I'm apparently just the helper, you'll need to find someone else to co-sign on any future loans or handle overdue bills. Because I'm done. Fully done. And if you decide to keep this house, then you'll be maintaining it on your own. Property taxes included. Caleb stood up, fist clenched. You're such a child, Aiden. This is family. We're supposed to help each other. I turned to him, slowly. You mean the way I helped you with your car? Or your phone bill? Or mom and dad's mortgage? Or all the years I paid for Christmas dinner and didn't say a word while you showed up with empty hands? He said nothing. Then I turned to Dad. You wanted to leave a legacy. You already had one. But you didn't recognize it because it didn't look like you. The silence was so thick it was almost physical. I stood up, slid my chair in slowly. No hard feelings, I said. I just finally realized I'm not part of this family the way you all are with each other. And I'm done pretending I am. I walked toward the door, my footsteps the only sound in the room. And just as I reached for the handle, I heard my mom's voice, small, cracking. Aiden, what are you going to do? I paused, turned back slightly, and said, I guess we'll find out. Then I walked out and left them with the truth still echoing in that dim, flickering room. I didn't hear from them for 2 days. After that dinner, I figured one of them, probably Mom, would call with some emotional plea, or maybe Caleb would send a long, condescending text trying to clear the air. But nothing came, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. They were still trying to decide how much of what I said was a bluff, how much control I really had. They'd spent years seeing me as the background player, the assistant, the extra, the guy behind the curtain keeping everything stitched together. The idea that I held leverage, that I could walk away and take half the structure down with me, it wasn't just inconvenient. It was unthinkable to them. But I didn't need to bluff, because I knew exactly how fragile their setup was without me. And it didn't take long before they found out too. By Thursday, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, local area code. I let it go to voicemail. Turns out it was the mortgage officer. The message was clipped but professional. Mr. Grant, we've been made aware there's some confusion about authorization on the Henderson property. Just confirming you're still co-owner and haven't consented to the requested refinancing. I called her back that afternoon, calm as anything, and said, that's correct. I haven't authorized anything. I also won't be signing off on any changes. She thanked me, asked for a written confirmation, and said they'd be halting everything until further notice. An hour later, Caleb called. This time I picked up. What are you doing? His voice was sharp, like he'd been waiting all day to scream. Hi, Caleb, I said lightly. To what do I owe the pleasure? Don't play dumb, he snapped. You told the bank you're blocking the refinance? That was the plan to catch up on the bills. You mean the plan that no one ran by me? I said, you can't make plans with assets you don't fully own. That's not how it works. You're punishing all of us, he said, because of one dinner conversation. No, I said, my tone cooling. I'm stepping back from a system where I was used. There's a difference. You're being dramatic. And you're being entitled, I said, finally letting the edge into my voice. I didn't do this to get back at you. I did this because I realized I've spent 10 years solving problems for a family that never once treated me like part of it. There was silence on the other end. You want the house? I continued. Buy me out. I'll even sell below market value, to be generous. But if you think you're going to keep it and freeze me out of decisions, that ends now. He hung up. The next morning, I got a call from Mom. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She just sounded tired. Aiden, she said, I don't know what's happening to us. I didn't say anything. I've been thinking about what you said, about being the helper, about the way we've leaned on you. Still, I waited. I think we all got comfortable. You never complained. And, well, I guess we assumed you didn't mind, that you liked being in the background. I didn't mind helping, I said, but I never signed up to be invisible. Her voice cracked. You're not invisible. Yes, I am, I said softly. You just don't notice until something breaks. She didn't argue. That silence said more than any apology could have. Then she asked, what do you want us to do? And that's when I realized, for the first time, they were actually listening. Not deflecting, not minimizing. Listening. So I told her the truth. I want boundaries, I said. Clear ones. No more calls about bills. No more requests to bail someone out. If I help, it's because I choose to, not because I'm expected to. She was quiet. And the will. I added, it's your choice what you do with your estate. But don't insult me by pretending I was never part of the legacy. If you're writing me out, be honest. If not, fix it. She promised they'd talk. And for the first time, I actually believed her. Weeks passed. I didn't rush back into things. I didn't start paying bills again or answering every message. I went about my life, focused on work, reconnected with friends I'd neglected because I was always busy putting out family fires. I even took a solo trip to Lisbon. First vacation in years where I didn't have to check my email for someone else's emergencies. Then, in early spring, I got a certified letter from the family's attorney. Inside was a copy of the revised will. It was simple, split evenly between Caleb and me. No favoritism, no qualifiers, just fairness. Attached was a handwritten note from Dad. Aiden, we were wrong. I was wrong. You've done more for this family than any of us have acknowledged. That changes now, not because of guilt, but because you deserve it. Thank you for showing us what you were holding up, even when we didn't look. Dad, I sat with that for a while. Let it soak in. And yeah, I cried a little. Not because I needed their money or their apology, but because after a lifetime of being treated like the spare, I'd finally stood my ground. And they finally saw me. We're not perfect now. We'll probably never be. Caleb's still Caleb, still a little arrogant, still learning that life doesn't revolve around him. But he respects me now. We talk. It's not deep yet, but it's something. Mom and Dad have pulled back too. They don't ask me to fix things anymore, not without asking if I want to. Sometimes I say yes. Sometimes I say no. But it's always my choice. And the house. I sold my share. Not out of spite. Just freedom. They bought me out, and with that money, I put a down payment on my own place. My own home. Not inherited. Not shared. Mine. It's quiet here. Peaceful. Sometimes too quiet. But it's the first time in my life I've had a space that didn't come with someone else's needs baked into the walls. Sometimes I walk through the rooms and think about everything I gave. All the pieces of myself I poured into people who never said thank you. But mostly, I think about the moment I stopped waiting to be valued and chose, instead, to value myself. That was the day everything changed. And I've never looked back. My name's Ryan, I'm 27, and this happened last Thanksgiving, an event my family now refers to as the reunion, not because it was particularly warm or joyful, but because it was the last time everyone would be under one roof without it turning ugly. I wasn't planning to go that year, if I'm honest. Life had been messy. I had just switched jobs after a rough layoff, was bouncing between apartments, and had spent the past 2 years trying to pull myself out of a rut I didn't even realize I was in. My mom had begged me to come, said it would be good for me to be around everyone, which, in hindsight, is hilarious. I don't come from a massive family, but there are enough of us to fill a house, especially when the cousins bring their kids. The reunion was at my Uncle Tim's place this time, big house in the suburbs, high ceilings, those huge windows that make you feel like you're in a catalog. My Aunt Valerie, Uncle Tim's younger sister, had flown in from across the country. That's who this story is about. Valerie has always been loud. She walks into a room and suddenly everyone's volume goes up by 30%. She's the type of person who talks at you, not with you. And if you ever mention you're doing well, she's mysteriously doing better. Always. My mom used to say she's just insecure, but after a while, that excuse wears thin. When we were kids, she used to pit me and her son Jordan against each other. Every spelling bee, every basketball game, even how fast we finished dinner. I didn't realize it until I was older, but she always made it a competition because she needed Jordan to come out on top. It didn't matter that I never saw it that way, she did. She still does. Anyway, the day before the reunion, I was lying on my too small couch, scrolling through job listings I wouldn't apply to when I saw I had a voicemail. It was from Valerie. That caught me off guard. We'd never exactly been close, and she hadn't even texted me in, I want to say 3 years? I tapped play, curious, and immediately sat upright. Her voice came through, sharp and clear. Ugh, I can't stand Ryan. I don't even know why Tim invited him. He's such an embarrassment. Still floundering, no real job, no relationship, just wasting time pretending he's finding himself or whatever. I mean, come on, he's almost 30. I told Jordan, if he ever ends up like that, I'll disown him. There was a pause, some rustling, then she kept going. Honestly, I hope he doesn't show up. He's always been weird. Remember when he tried to do stand-up comedy for a year? What a joke. Pun intended. My stomach dropped. I didn't even finish the rest at first. I just sat there, staring at the ceiling like I was waiting for it to explain something to me. I wasn't angry yet. I was confused, embarrassed. You know that awful stomach clench you get when someone talks about you behind your back and it confirms every fear you already had about how they saw you? Yeah, that. It felt like middle school again, overhearing the popular kids laugh about your haircut. I played it back twice. Then I saved it. Something in me clicked after the second listen. It wasn't the first time Valerie had made me feel small, but it might have been the first time I had actual proof. Evidence. And not just any evidence, her own voice, smug and dripping with cruelty. I wasn't sure what to do with it yet, but I knew I wouldn't let it go. Thanksgiving Day came. I pulled up to Uncle Tim's place a few minutes late on purpose, just so I wouldn't be the first one there. The driveway was already packed, so I parked down the street and walked up. As soon as I opened the door, the noise hit me like a wave, kids screaming, the clatter of dishes, someone laughing too hard in the kitchen. It smelled like turkey and cinnamon and fake cheer. I slipped in quietly, hoping to just blend into the background. That didn't last long. Ryan. Valerie's voice rang out before I even took my coat off. I turned to see her beaming at me, arms open like we were long-lost best friends. Look at you. You made it. I forced a smile. Wouldn't miss it. She gave me a hug, tight and performative, then pulled back to look at me. Still doing that? What was it? Freelance thing? Sort of, I said. I'm working on a few projects. She raised an eyebrow, smirking. Oh, fun. Well, Jordan just got promoted at the firm. Big corner office. We're very proud. Of course he did. I spent the next hour floating through conversations, trying to avoid her, but it was like she was magnetized to me. Every time I thought I could slip away, she was there, reminding me that Jordan was now engaged, that he'd bought his second property, that he might get published in some legal journal. I hadn't even seen Jordan yet. He was probably hiding in the basement like I wished I could. At one point, I went to get some cranberry sauce and Valerie followed me to the kitchen. I heard you moved again, she said, faux concerned. Must be hard, bouncing around. Stability is so important at your age. I'm fine, thanks, I muttered, trying not to slam the fridge door. I just worry about you, she said, with a syrupy tone that made my teeth clench. Your mom says you're still figuring things out. I guess some people take longer than others. That was it. I had been biting my tongue all afternoon, but that did it. You know, Valerie, I said, setting the cranberry sauce down carefully, you don't have to fake being nice. I know how you feel. She blinked, thrown off. What do you mean? I met her gaze. You left me a voicemail last night. I heard everything. Her face drained of color so fast I thought she might actually faint. Her mouth opened, then closed again like she was searching for a response but couldn't find one. For the first time ever, she was speechless. I walked away before she could recover, heart thudding in my chest. I didn't go far, just into the living room where the rest of the family was gathered. I tried to act casual, chatting with my cousin Ellie about her dog, but I could feel Valerie's eyes burning into the back of my head. Dinner started a little while later. Long table, everyone passing dishes around, laughter. It almost felt normal, but Valerie was quiet. She kept glancing at me like I was holding a grenade. I think she was praying I wouldn't say anything. Then my Uncle Tim stood up to make his usual thankful for family toast. That was when Valerie decided to go full Oscar performance. I just want to say, she said loudly, cutting him off, how grateful I am that we're all together. Even Ryan. She looked right at me, that fake smile plastered on her face. It's good to see you again, honey. Everyone turned to look at me. My mom gave me a small, hopeful smile. Valerie looked smug, like she thought she'd won something. That's when I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look angry. I just said, Thanks, Valerie. I wasn't sure I should come this year. But then I got your voicemail. There was a beat of silence. What voicemail? She asked, too quickly. I pulled out my phone. The one you accidentally sent me last night. She shook her head, laughing nervously. I don't know what you're talking about. I can play it for everyone if you want. And that's when the room went silent. Valerie's face twitched. Her smile faltered, twitching at the corners like a crumpling mask. I could feel every pair of eyes at that table shift from me to her, then back to me. The room, once buzzing with idle chatter and clinking silverware, had sunk into pure silence. Even the kids at the far end had gone quiet, sensing something was happening, something not part of the usual Thanksgiving performance. I really don't think, Valerie started, but her voice cracked, and that crack was enough for me to know I had her cornered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I tapped my phone screen, scrolled to my saved voicemails, and hit play. Her voice filled the room. Ugh, I can't stand Ryan. I don't even know why Tim invited him. It was surreal, like watching a movie and recognizing your own name in the script. Everyone heard it. Her words, her tone, the arrogance. And the best part? I didn't say a thing. I just let it play, my phone held loosely in my hand. I didn't even look at her. I watched everyone else. Uncle Tim blinked, slowly setting down his glass. My mom looked like someone had punched the air out of her lungs. Jordan had frozen, fork halfway to his mouth, like someone had hit pause on him. Ellie, bless her, gave me a small nod from across the table. She'd always known something was off about Valerie. Then came the end of the message. Pretending he's finding himself, or whatever. I mean, come on, he's almost 30. I told Jordan, if he ever ends up like that, I'll disown him. The silence that followed was electric. Thick. No one breathed. No one moved. And then Valerie laughed. A shaky, brittle thing that sounded more like a machine misfiring than a human sound. Oh, come on, she said, looking around like we were all in on some inside joke. It was private. I didn't mean for him to hear that. People vent. Everyone vents sometimes. But you meant it, I said, still calm. Right? You said it. No one forced you. Ryan, don't be dramatic, she snapped, her voice sharpening. You know I've always pushed you to do better. That's love. Calling me a disgrace is love? I raised an eyebrow. She opened her mouth again, but Uncle Tim cut in. Valerie, stop. She froze. Her brother's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. More than I'd ever heard from him before. He looked at her, then at me. Ryan, I'm sorry you heard that. You shouldn't have been spoken about that way. Not by family. Valerie's face twisted. You're taking his side? No one should be treated like that, he said simply. And just like that, the spotlight turned back to her. All her years of smirks and snide remarks, all the little ways she dug at me, or anyone else she deemed less than her, were suddenly exposed under a microscope. No one was defending her. No one was laughing along. For the first time in my life, Valerie was alone in a room full of people who had finally heard her for who she really was. She stood up, rattling the dishes around her. I'm not going to sit here and be attacked. This is ridiculous. My mom spoke for the first time. Quietly. Valerie, you attacked him first. Valerie blinked like she'd been slapped. She looked around, maybe expecting someone to rescue her. Jordan wouldn't even meet her eyes. She huffed, snatched her purse off the back of the chair, and stormed toward the front door. Everyone stayed frozen in their seats. No one followed her. And just like that, she was gone. But the silence remained, like we were all stuck in the echo of what just happened. I sat back down slowly, unsure what to do next. My hands were shaking a little. I hadn't planned to play the voicemail like that. I thought I might confront her privately, maybe show my mom later, but in that moment, when she smiled and called me out like she hadn't just trashed me the night before, something in me snapped. And maybe that something had been waiting for years. I looked around. Some faces were stunned. Some were sympathetic. Others just looked tired. Then, for the first time all day, Jordan spoke. His voice was soft. Hey man, I didn't know she said all that. I'm sorry. I nodded. It's not your fault. She's all like that. With everyone. Even me. We didn't say much more after that, but his words hung in the air. There was something new in them. Not quite regret, not quite solidarity, but something like it. Something that suggested this wasn't just about me. That maybe Valerie's reign of passive aggression and behind-the-back cruelty had been hurting more people than anyone realized. The rest of dinner was awkward, to say the least. No one had much of an appetite anymore. A few people tried to shift the mood. Uncle Tim cracked a dry joke. My cousin Laura passed around pie like we were still pretending everything was fine, but the atmosphere had changed. Something had fractured. And while it was painful, it also felt necessary. Later that night, after everyone had left and the house had mostly cleared out, I stayed behind to help clean. My mom and I ended up in the kitchen, washing dishes side by side. The hum of the faucet filled the silence for a while, until she finally spoke. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. I didn't say anything right away. I just nodded, the lump in my throat too big to talk around. I didn't cry. Not then. But something softened in me, something that had been hardened by years of biting my tongue and swallowing my dignity around certain people. For once, I hadn't taken it. And for once, someone else had to. We didn't talk much more that night. I think my mom knew I needed space to process everything, and honestly, I appreciated that more than any pep talk. The car ride home was silent, just the hum of tires on pavement and the occasional flicker of street lights on the windshield. My phone buzzed once. Valerie's name. I didn't open it. I didn't even read the preview. I just watched it fade off the screen. The next few days were weird. I wasn't expecting fallout, but apparently that voicemail had hit harder than I realized. Turns out, a lot of people had stories. Quiet stories. Moments they'd brushed off or buried. A comment here, a dig there. Little things that didn't seem worth bringing up at the time but left scars anyway. The voicemail was like a crack in a dam. Once it split open, everything started pouring out. Ellie texted me first. She said, "Okay, I know it was tense, but that was legendary. I've wanted to say something to her for years." Then my cousin Laura messaged me on Instagram. Laura texted. She told me I was looking tired at my own wedding. Who says that? Thank you for doing what the rest of us were too afraid to. Even Jordan texted again. It's weird, but I think you snapped me out of something. I've been walking on eggshells around her my whole life. Every message made me feel lighter, like I wasn't crazy. Like maybe all those times I'd walked away from a family event feeling small or off or vaguely ashamed weren't in my head. Maybe it wasn't me. And then the group chat happened. We have a family group chat, of course, called The Crew, because my uncle thinks he's cooler than he is. Normally it's just forwarded memes, baby pics, and the occasional happy birthday chain. But 3 days after Thanksgiving, Valerie sent a message. Valerie texted, "I think it's time we talk about what happened. There's been a lot of overreaction, and I'm not going to let my character be dragged through the mud." That was the start of her downfall. At first, no one said anything. Then Ellie replied. Ellie said, "Overreaction? You literally called Ryan a disgrace in a voicemail you didn't realize you sent." Valerie texted, "People say things in private that they don't mean. It's normal." Jordan texted, "You meant it. And you've said stuff like that for years." The typing bubbles came and went for a while. Then Uncle Tim chimed in. Uncle Tim said, "Valerie, you embarrassed yourself. That's not anyone else's fault. You don't get to blame Ryan for your words." She tried to pivot. Valerie texted, "So now I'm the villain because I have standards? I care about this family's reputation. I was concerned about Ryan." I replied, "You called me a waste of space. That's not concern. That's cruelty." There were more typing bubbles. Then suddenly, Valerie exploded. Wall of text. Capital letters. Passive-aggressive guilt tripping about how she's always been honest, how she's the only one willing to say what everyone else is thinking, and how the family has become soft and dramatic since we all started prioritizing feelings over facts. She even pulled the "I've done so much for this family" card, which was hilarious because Valerie's version of doing things was showing up late, bringing store-bought cookies, and spending the entire event pointing out who gained weight or who looked tired. That's when Laura finally said what we were all thinking. Laura texted, "You know what, Valerie? You're exhausting. Every time we get together, you make someone feel worse. We've all let it slide for years because you're family. But family doesn't mean immunity. It means accountability." That opened the floodgates. People started chiming in, nicely, but firmly. Stories came out. The time Valerie mocked Ellie for not going to grad school. The time she told Jordan's ex she wasn't pretty enough to marry into the family. The time she said I was too sensitive after I lost a job and asked for space. Every story stacked on top of the last, building this undeniable picture of someone who had spent years playing queen bee at our expense, and who, for the first time, was finally being told no. And then she snapped. She left the group chat. Dramatically. Valerie has left the chat. 10 minutes later, My phone buzzed with a notification Valerie had posted a Facebook status. Full public meltdown. I didn't see it right away, but Ellie screenshotted it. I've never felt so betrayed in my life. I always tried to help this family, to keep people honest. But now I see I'm surrounded by weakness and entitlement. If standing up for decency makes me the villain, so be it. I'll remove myself from your drama and pray for you all. Especially Ryan. She tagged me. The post got 3 likes, all from distant relatives we haven't seen in years. Meanwhile, the comments started rolling in, mostly people saying things like, maybe time to take a break from social media, or sometimes growth means listening, not reacting. Jordan commented, simply, this isn't helping. Please stop. She deleted the post 2 hours later. By the end of the week, it was clear Valerie had burned her bridges. Not permanently, maybe families are complicated, but enough that she wasn't going to bounce back like she used to. Her phone calls went unanswered. Her guilt trips got ignored. She even tried texting me again. She said, I hope you're happy. You've turned my own family against me. I didn't reply. Because I was happy. Not in a petty way. Well, okay, maybe a little petty, but mostly in the way that comes from finally standing up for yourself and realizing the world doesn't fall apart when you do. That sometimes, speaking up doesn't make you the problem, it reveals it. I don't know what's next for Valerie. Last I heard, she was telling mutual relatives she was rethinking who she spends holidays with, which honestly sounds like a win for everyone involved. As for me, I'm doing okay. The family is quieter now. Smaller. But it feels healthier. Less walking on eggshells, more genuine connection. People talk with each other now, not around each other. And yeah, Thanksgiving 2024 will be remembered for a lot of things. It's been a few months now, and things have settled in the best way possible. The next family gathering was smaller, Valerie wasn't there, and no one really asked why. The food tasted better. The conversations were easier. It felt like a group of people who wanted to be around each other, not just people showing up out of obligation. I wouldn't say I took pleasure in how everything went down, but I did feel something close to peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. I stopped apologizing for figuring things out at my own pace. I realized that just because someone is family doesn't mean they're allowed to treat you like less. Respect isn't automatic. It's earned, and sometimes, it's reclaimed. Jordan and I have actually grown closer since everything happened. Funny how that works. We talk more now, not just about family stuff, but real things. Life. Pressure. The weird weight of expectations. Turns out we were both trying to meet a standard that no one ever actually defined. And now, we're building something new. Better. As for Valerie, I haven't heard from her since that last text. Maybe she's still angry. Maybe she's waiting for someone to apologize. But I'm not going to shrink again to make her comfortable. I don't need her validation anymore. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself, and for everyone else, is stop pretending something broken is whole. That's not betrayal. That's honesty. And honestly, I'm proud of myself. My name's Darren, I'm 28, and I've always been the other son. You know, the one who gets polite nods at family gatherings while your younger brother gets full-on applause for showing up late. Growing up, I never made waves. I wasn't the straight-A golden child like Liam, nor the charming, always has a story uncle like Greg. I was the one who showed up early, helped set the table, and got asked to take the group photo instead of being in it. I guess I used to think that was just how families worked. Some people are loved louder, others are just present. But this year, something inside me cracked. It started a few weeks ago when my mom called me, voice all sugar and spice. Liam's turning 26. We're doing something special for him. You'll come, right? I said sure, thinking maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe I'd get a thank you for the car payment I covered when Dad's engine blew out last fall. Or some kind of acknowledgement that I've been sending Mom money every month since she lost her job. But I didn't hold my breath. I just marked the date, bought a new shirt, and even made a reservation at a nice place downtown when she told me the original restaurant couldn't accommodate their big group. Turns out that's where they were planning to go all along, just without me. The dinner was set at this trendy rooftop spot with velvet booths and those massive wine glasses that feel too fancy for actual drinking. I walked in right on time, spotted the long table near the center, filled with all the usual suspects. Mom and Dad at one end, Liam holding court in the middle with his girlfriend draped on him like a scarf, and a half-dozen cousins snapping pictures with their phones. My heart dropped the second I saw the table. Every chair was filled, not a single empty seat. For a moment, I thought maybe there was another table. Maybe they'd gotten a side spot for the overflow guests. But nope, that was it. I stood there like a fool, unsure whether to wave or walk away. Then my Aunt Janice, Mom's older sister, always dressed like she was trying out for Real Housewives, Suburbs Edition, turned, looked me up and down, and cackled. "Oh well, you can stand. You're used to being on the sidelines." A few of the cousins snickered, not even bothering to hide it. Liam didn't even glance over. No one shifted. No one scooted. They just kept passing the bread basket around like I wasn't even there. I forced a tight smile, nodded once, and turned toward the bar. Sat on a stiff leather stool with my back to them, and ordered the cheapest whiskey they had. I could feel the burn before it even hit my throat, but I didn't care. I sipped it slow, eyes fixed on the amber ripples in the glass. Behind me, the sound of clinking cutlery, laughter, and camera flashes blended into one long, blurry hum. I didn't want to be part of it anymore. Not like that. About an hour in, the bartender slid me another drink. I hadn't ordered a second one. He jerked his thumb toward the table. "Compliments of the birthday boy," he said. I turned and saw Liam raise his glass lazily in my direction. That was the extent of my invitation, an afterthought in a rocks glass. I didn't drink it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old messages, trying to distract myself. One from 2 months ago caught my eye. Mom asking if I could help cover Liam's overdue rent just this once. Another from last Christmas, where I'd sent Dad a $500 Visa card after he forgot my gift again. A voice inside me whispered, "You don't belong at that table. You built it, but you're not invited to sit there." The hours dragged on. I watched them pose for group selfies, laughing like a sitcom family. Even the server joined in at one point, taking a picture with Liam like he was some kind of celebrity. I stayed at the bar, chewing on ice and watching the city lights shimmer through the glass walls. I was halfway through drafting a polite excuse text to leave when the manager approached. He was wearing a tight black vest and a practiced smile, but his tone was clipped. "Excuse me, sir. Your party said you'd be covering the bill tonight." I blinked, not sure I heard right. "I'm sorry." He gestured toward the table. "They said the bill is under your name. It's $3,200. My mind stalled. $3,000? For what? They must have ordered half the wine list and all the appetizers in the city. I stood slowly, the stool creaking under me, and looked over. Mom was laughing with Janice. Liam had his arm around his girlfriend, and Dad was snapping his fingers at the server for another drink. No one was even looking at me. I downed the last of my drink, placed the empty glass gently on the bar, and adjusted my sleeves. "Sorry," I said calmly. "I left my wallet at the family table." Then I turned and walked. Not briskly, just smooth, even steps, like I was leaving a movie halfway through. I could feel the tension shift behind me, like the air got sucked out of the room. I reached the elevator when I heard it. My mom's voice, loud and panicked. "Stop him." The door slid closed. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't stop. The elevator hummed softly as it descended, each floor feeling like a breath I hadn't allowed myself to take in years. My reflection in the mirror-paneled walls looked unfamiliar, calm, deliberate, almost detached. But beneath that stillness, I was boiling. I hit the lobby just as a different family walked in, all smiles and chatter, probably heading up to a celebration of their own. I slipped past them, pushed open the glass doors, and stepped into the cool night air. The city buzzed around me, honking cars, distant music, heels clicking on pavement, but inside, everything had gone still, like my brain was buffering. I didn't go home right away. I walked. I needed to feel something. The sidewalk beneath my shoes, the sting of the breeze on my face, the dull ache blooming in my chest. I ended up at this late-night cafe I used to frequent back in college. Back when I thought if I worked hard enough, proved myself enough, they'd finally look at me the way they looked at Liam. I sat outside with a coffee I didn't touch and just stared into the dark, trying to untangle the knot in my gut. The truth was, I'd known they didn't respect me. I just hadn't expected them to throw it in my face with a $3,200 receipt. I'd always rationalized it. Liam's the baby. He's just struggling. He needs more help. He'll grow up eventually. Mom's just under stress. Dad's not good with emotions. But this wasn't just favoritism. It was calculated disrespect. They didn't forget to seat me. They didn't want to. They didn't assume I'd pay the bill. They expected me to. Because I always had. Every single time. The car I helped Liam finance. The emergency vet bill when mom's cat got sick. The home repairs for dad. The groceries. The birthday gifts no one matched. The quiet little ways I made their lives easier while they acted like I was a backup dancer in the family's production of the Liam show. And the worst part? I let them. But tonight, something snapped. I stayed out until nearly midnight. My phone had blown up. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. I didn't open any of them. When I finally walked through my front door, the apartment felt different. Not just because I was seeing it with new eyes, but because it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every framed photo, every utility bill and grocery trip, I'd done it without them. No handouts. No pity. I sat at my desk, stared at my laptop for a long moment, then opened my banking app. I'd been sending my parents $800 a month for years. Quietly. Automatically. A little help here and there. A bit of stability for mom after her job loss. A supplement for dad's pension. No one ever said thank you. The few times I brought it up, mom would wave it off like I was talking about pocket change. We all do what we can, she'd say, like I was just carrying my weight. Well, that weight was coming off. Click. Cancelled. Then I opened another tab and logged into the joint bank account Liam's name was secretly tied to. Back when I'd co-signed for him to get his apartment. He'd promised to take over within a year. That was 4 years ago. I'd asked nicely. I'd sent reminders. And every time, I got the same half smile and, "I'll sort it out, bro." He never did. But I had access. So I moved my half out. Then I closed the account. And then I emailed the leasing office a scanned copy of the paperwork I'd kept, declaring that, effective immediately, I was removing myself as guarantor. I knew they'd come knocking. I just didn't care anymore. Around 1 a.m., I finally checked my phone. The first few texts were predictably dramatic. Mom. Darren, how could you just walk out like that? You embarrassed us. Dad. Be a man and handle your responsibilities. Liam. Dude, WTF? You said you'd take care of dinner. I'd said no such thing. Then came the voicemails. One from Janice. Janice, scolding me like I was a child who misbehaved at church. You made your mother cry, Darren. Is that what you wanted? Because she's in the bathroom sobbing. I almost laughed. But the one that finally got me was the last voicemail. From my mom. Her voice was trembling, but not with sadness, more like panic. They're saying the card didn't go through. I thought you always cover things. Darren, please call me back. It was the first time in a long time she'd said please. I didn't call. Instead, I opened a group chat I'd never dared touch before, the family one. The one where I was always an afterthought, if mentioned at all. Birthday plans. Photos. Memes no one laughed at. Liam's achievements. Janice's daughter's wedding. Occasionally someone would tag me, usually to ask for help. So I typed a message. Just one line. You said I was covering the bill. I just did. Then I attached a photo of the canceled transfers, the bank account closure, and the formal guarantor removal letter. And then I turned off my phone and went to bed. I slept better that night than I had in years. But the fallout? Oh, that came fast. By morning, my phone looked like it had suffered a heart attack. 73 notifications. 24 missed calls. And the group chat? Exploding. I didn't check it right away. I made coffee. I opened my balcony door and let the breeze in. It was a rare calm for a Thursday morning. The kind of silence that feels like the world holding its breath. I stood there, mug in hand, looking out over the rooftops. For once, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. I wasn't running a mental checklist of what I owed, who needed what, how I could quietly fix someone else's mess. When I finally sat down and opened the messages, it felt like peeling off a bandage. Mom, I just don't understand, Darren. After everything we've done for you, you would humiliate us like that in front of the entire family. Dad, you think you're above us now? You're lucky we let you sit at the bar. Liam, BRO, you literally ruined my birthday. You couldn't just handle it like usual? It was one dinner. Then came a barrage of guilt grenades. Aunt Janice, your mother looked like she was going to faint. And poor Liam's girlfriend had to step in to cover part of the bill with her credit card. Is this how you repay your family? Cousin Emily. If you didn't want to be there, why show up at all? You made everything awkward. But the one that stuck with me wasn't the loudest. It came from Liam's girlfriend, Carly. A simple message, almost hesitant. Carly, hey, I'm not sure what happened, but honestly, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. It was the only message I replied to. Me. Thank you. That was it. I ignored the rest. By midday, the tone had shifted from outrage to desperation. Probably once they realized the account I used to deposit money into every month was no longer active. I imagined my mom trying to use the card for groceries, only to get declined. Or dad, logging into his online banking and seeing a sudden shortfall. The quiet support I'd always provided, cut like a thread they didn't even know was holding everything together. And then came the first knock. It was around 6 p.m. I knew it before I even checked the peephole. The frantic knock, the uneven rhythm. It wasn't a neighbor or a friend. It was them. I didn't open the door. I watched from the other side as Mom's silhouette shifted, nervously glancing around the hallway. She knocked again, softer this time. Darren, honey, please. We just want to talk. I stayed still. I heard Dad's voice next. Firmer. Irritated. This is childish. You need to grow up and fix this. We're your parents. More knocking. A pause. Then Liam. Come on, man. You made your point, okay? You want to be petty? Fine. But just don't mess us over because you felt left out. Felt left out. That phrasing hit me like a punch to the ribs. Felt left out, like it was some imaginary offense. Like there hadn't been a literal, physical table where they'd chosen not to seat me. Like there hadn't been a $3,200 assumption tied to my name, my worth, my silence. They stayed out there for nearly 10 minutes, cycling through the roles, guilt, authority, manipulation, even fake concern. But eventually, the voices faded. I watched their figures retreat through the peephole. Still, I didn't move. Instead, I sat down at my kitchen table and opened the drawer where I kept every receipt, invoice, and bank statement tied to them. I'd never planned to use them. I kept them for my own peace of mind, just in case. But now I wasn't sure. There was so much history in those documents. Years of quiet support, unspoken agreements. The time I covered the $4,200 for Mom's dental surgery when her insurance didn't come through. The $6,800 I paid toward Liam's failed business experiment. The furniture I bought for Dad's garage remodel that he later claimed he had funded. All of it. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. Not loud, stomping, shouting angry. But a deep, seething kind of angry. The kind that comes from years of being underestimated, overlooked, used. And as I stared at those receipts, at the cold, hard evidence of everything I'd given, I began to plan. Not out of vengeance. Out of clarity. Because if they thought the real cost was just one dinner bill, they had no idea what they were about to lose. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was overwhelmed or regretful, but because I was awake for the first time in years, really awake. My brain wasn't fogged with guilt or obligations. I wasn't replaying what I could have done differently to make everyone happy. I was calm, alert, focused. By 3 a.m., every document was sorted and scanned. Bank transfers, credit card statements, receipts, even the signed lease agreement that proved I had co-signed for Liam's apartment. I labeled each one, marked the dates, cross-referenced them with old messages and emails that showed the context. Mom asking me for help with a temporary bill, Liam promising to pay me back next week, Dad saying he'd handle it next month. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was reclaiming my story. The next morning, I took a personal day from work. No explanation, just a simple out-of-office notice. I made myself breakfast, showered, got dressed, and printed everything. I walked out of my apartment with a folder tucked under my arm and a destination in mind. My parents lived in a 2-story suburban house 25 minutes away, a house I had helped repaint, rewire, and partially refurnish. It looked the same as always. The flower pots I bought for Mother's Day sat on the porch, now wilted and cracked. Dad's old truck was parked crooked on the driveway. Liam's car was gone, probably borrowing it to avoid paying for Uber again. I didn't knock. I rang the doorbell and waited. It was Mom who opened the door. Her eyes were puffy. She'd definitely been crying. But when she saw me, her face shifted instantly from vulnerability to performative relief. "Oh, Darren," she breathed, reaching for me. "I'm so glad you came." I took a step back. "I'm not here to hug it out." Her hand froze in midair. The color drained from her cheeks. She moved aside to let me in. I stepped into the house and was immediately hit by the smell of bacon and resentment. Dad was at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. He didn't even look up. I walked straight to the dining room. The very table they'd gathered around to celebrate Liam the night before. I set the folder down in the center and opened it slowly, methodically. Mom hovered near the entrance, confused. Dad finally looked up, eyes narrowing. I don't have time for games, Darren. This isn't a game, I said quietly. It's a summary. I pulled out the first document. This is the $2,500 I wired to you after you said you were about to lose the house. I checked later. Turns out you were only 2 weeks behind on payments. But you took the money anyway. Mom flinched. I pulled out the next one. This is the breakdown of all the monthly deposits I've been making into your joint account since 2019. Over $28,000 in total. I flipped to the next. This is Liam's lease, signed by me, and the email from the landlord where I requested to remove myself. He may want to start budgeting soon. Dad stood abruptly, the chair scraping behind him. What are you trying to do? Ruin your own family? I looked at him. I'm just done funding it. Mom finally found her voice. You don't understand what this will do to us. I cut her off. No, you don't understand. You thought you could treat me like an ATM with a pulse. And when I finally said no, you framed it as betrayal. My voice wasn't angry. It was steady, sharp, like I'd filed it down overnight into something I could finally wield. I pulled out the last page, a typed letter, folded once. This is a formal notice that I'm severing all financial support. Effective immediately. No more temporary help. No more surprise bills. No more emergencies that only I seem responsible for. I looked at both of them. I will not be covering the dinner. I will not be your backup plan. Dad laughed bitterly. So that's it. You're walking away? Just like that. I took a breath. You've been walking away from me for years. I'm just finally turning in the opposite direction. I left the folder there on the table. As I walked toward the door, Mom followed me. But we're family, Darren. We've made mistakes, but this is cruel. I turned to her one last time. What's cruel is raising a son you only call when something breaks. And then I walked out. I expected that to be the end of it. But it wasn't. Word got around the family faster than wildfire. Aunt Janice sent a passive-aggressive Facebook post about disrespectful children who forget who raised them. Cousin Emily unfollowed me and posted a story about narcissistic behavior disguised as boundaries. Even Grandma called to ask if I was going through something and said she missed my Christmas cookies already. But none of it touched me, because for every cold shoulder, there was something warmer waiting. Like the text from Carly again. I've always admired how quietly you take care of people. I hope you finally start taking care of yourself. Or my coworker Amanda, who noticed I wasn't myself that week and invited me to a bonfire with her friends. And then there was something even better, silence. The kind that isn't empty, but peaceful. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I wasn't anxiously watching my phone for the next request, the next manipulation masked as a family favor. I was living on my own terms. A few weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a torn copy of the bill from the restaurant, along with a note written in sharp, rushed handwriting. I hope it was worth it. I smiled. It was. Because the price of dinner wasn't $3,200. It was my freedom. And I had finally paid in full. I'm Felix, I'm 33, and this Christmas was supposed to be simple. That's what my mom said when she called me in late November. Money's tight this year, so don't expect much, okay? Her voice carried that half-apologetic, half-guilty tone she used whenever she wanted me to let something slide before it even happened. I told her I understood. Everyone was feeling the pinch lately, and honestly, I meant it. My focus was just on making the holidays special for my 7-year-old son, Lucas. It's been a rough year for him after my divorce, and I figured a quiet, cozy family Christmas at my parents' house might lift his spirits. I should have known better. My family has always had layers. I'm the middle child, not quite the golden one, not quite the forgotten one. My older sister, Melissa, is the golden child to the textbook definition. She's 36, has 3 kids, a husband who sells insurance, and an Instagram page that looks like a Hallmark movie threw up on it. My younger brother, Tyler, is 27 and still somehow treated like a fragile egg despite being a grown man who freelances, meaning he lives in my parents' basement and occasionally edits podcasts for his friends. Me? I moved out years ago, got my own place, work in IT, and take care of my kid. I don't make a fortune, but I manage. And unlike my siblings, I don't constantly borrow money or need rescuing. That's precisely why, I think, My parents have always felt more comfortable cutting corners with me. I never needed much, so they assumed I didn't deserve much either. When Mom said money was tight, I took her word for it. I even told Lucas that Christmas at Grandma's might be more about family than presents this year. He nodded, understanding in that gentle, too mature for his age way. That made me proud and a little sad at the same time. So Christmas morning came. Snow on the driveway, the smell of cinnamon rolls, everyone crammed into my parents' living room with coffee mugs and pajama pants. The tree looked smaller than usual, but still warm, twinkling with old ornaments and blinking lights. Melissa's kids were already buzzing around the tree, shaking boxes and whispering. Then came Mom's little speech. All right, everyone. Like I said, we kept things small this year. But it's about being together, right? Everyone nodded. And then it started. My niece opened the first gift, an iPad. An actual iPad. Melissa laughed and said, "Oh my gosh, Mom, you didn't." "Oh well," Mom chuckled. "We found a good deal." Then my nephew unwrapped a pair of Nike sneakers. Then another iPad for the second niece. Tyler got noise-canceling headphones. Even his girlfriend, who'd been dating him for 3 months, got a gift card to Sephora. I just sat there smiling politely, waiting. Maybe they saved ours for later. Maybe the big ones were for the kids and smaller ones for adults. It didn't really matter. I just didn't want Lucas to feel left out. When it was finally his turn, Mom handed him a small plastic bag, not even wrapped. Inside was a toy police car, the kind that costs maybe $2 at a dollar store. The wheels were already loose. Lucas looked up at me with this uncertain smile, like he didn't want to seem ungrateful. "Cool," he said softly. I felt something twist in my chest. Mom clapped her hands together and said, "See? Everyone got something." I glanced around the room. Melissa's kids tapping away on their new iPads, Tyler showing off his headphones, Dad leaning back in his chair with that smug smirk that only appears when he thinks he's teaching someone a lesson. Then he looked right at me and said, "Be grateful he got anything, Felix. Not every year can be fancy." For a moment, I just stared at him. Be grateful he got anything. I wanted to ask if being the only grandchild to receive a dollar store toy while the others got electronics was part of this money's tight situation. But I didn't. I just smiled, because I've learned over the years that arguing only feeds them. Melissa noticed my silence, of course. "Oh, come on, Felix," she said, unwrapping another present for her kids. "It's not about the gifts. Easy to say when your kids just got enough tech to start a YouTube channel." The rest of the morning dragged on. I helped Lucas open the toy and pretended it was fun. We played with it on the carpet while my nieces compared apps and took selfies. Every so often, Mom would glance my way, that same nervous guilt flickering across her face, but she never said anything. When breakfast was served, Dad made another joke. He looked at Lucas and said, "Maybe if your dad worked harder, Santa would have brought something bigger." The table went quiet. Even Melissa gave him a look. I felt my hands tighten around my coffee mug. Lucas just stared down at his plate. He didn't cry. He just looked small. Something inside me snapped a little that morning, though I didn't show it. Years of small slights, quiet favoritism, and being told to be grateful. It all stacked up right there under that twinkling Christmas tree. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, reached for my phone, and snapped a photo. The tree in the background, the open gifts, Lucas holding his toy car. No one thought much of it. But the next morning, when I posted it with a caption, well, that's when everything began to unravel. And I mean everything. When I woke up the next morning, the photo was already sitting at the top of my phone gallery, staring back at me like a quiet dare. I hadn't even planned to post anything originally. I just wanted a reminder, not of the gift, but of that moment. The way Lucas smiled, even when he was disappointed. The way my parents didn't even notice. The way it all looked perfectly normal from the outside. But something inside me shifted overnight. Maybe it was how Lucas had asked, before going to bed, "Dad, did I do something wrong? Grandma didn't like my letter?" He'd written her a Christmas card a week earlier, decorated it with stickers, drew a snowman, and wrote, "I love you, Grandma." That's the kind of kid he is. Sweet, thoughtful, the opposite of entitled. I had no answer for him. I just told him she loved him very much and that adults sometimes forget what's fair. But that look on his face, that stuck with me. So I posted the picture. It was the one of Lucas sitting cross-legged on the carpet, holding his cheap toy while his cousins tore into boxes behind him. The tree lights glowed in the background, and you could see one of the iPads reflecting the light right next to him. The caption? Simple. When money's tight, turns out to be selective. Merry Christmas from the discount section. No names. No accusations. Just that. I didn't expect it to explode. At first, a few friends liked it. Then a couple of co-workers commented things like, "That's rough, man," or "Hang in there, Felix." But within an hour, it started getting shared. Someone must have screenshotted it and posted it to a local group because by lunchtime, I was getting DMs from people I hadn't talked to since high school. Then came the group chat. Our family group chat is called Christmas Tree Family Festivities Christmas Tree, which, ironically, has never once been festive. I saw the unread messages piling up before I even opened it. Mom, Felix, what is this post? Melissa, wow, really mature of you. Dad, take that down. Now, I stared at my screen for a moment before responding. Me, which part's not true? 10 minutes of silence. Then Melissa replied, Melissa, you're trying to embarrass Mom and Dad. You know they've done their best. I almost laughed. Their best. That phrase has been used as a shield for decades. Their best when they forgot my birthday 2 years in a row. Their best when they skipped Lucas's kindergarten recital because Tyler wasn't feeling well. Their best when they paid Melissa's down payment for her house, but told me, we don't want to play favorites. I typed back, if this is their best, I'd hate to see their worst. That's when Dad called me. Felix, he said the moment I answered, his voice tight. You need to delete that post right now. Your mother's upset. Why is she upset? I asked calmly. Because people finally saw what it looks like when she plays favorites. Watch your tone. There it was. The phrase that always ended every argument when I was growing up. It didn't matter if I was right or if I was just asking for fairness. Watch your tone was the stop sign. Dad, I said, trying to stay level. Lucas got a broken toy from a dollar store while everyone else got electronics. You and Mom lied about being broke. Why shouldn't people know that? He scoffed. We don't owe you explanations for how we spend our money. Maybe we thought Melissa's kids needed it more. That line hit me like a punch. They're not exactly starving, Dad. They have 2 parents, both working, both well off. Lucas and I are fine too, but that's not the point. It's about fairness. Life's not fair, he said, with that smug tone he used when he thought he was teaching a lesson. You of all people should know that. I took a deep breath. Yeah, I said quietly. I learned it from you. And I hung up. After that, things escalated fast. Mom texted separately, paragraphs long, filled with half apologies disguised as explanations. We just wanted the kids to be happy, Felix. You know how Melissa's kids are used to certain things. We didn't think Lucas would care about brands. You've raised him so well. You should be proud that he's not materialistic. Proud. That word burned. I knew what she was really saying. You should be proud that he's easier to shortchange. I didn't respond. But then she sent another message. We'll make it up to him next year. Don't ruin Christmas for everyone. Next year. As if it was some scheduling error. As if this wasn't a pattern that had repeated for years. And she wasn't done. An hour later, she added, Your father says you're overreacting. It was just a small gift. Maybe you should apologize to everyone for the post before this gets worse. That's when I realized they weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry I'd made it visible. That evening, Melissa called. Not to apologize, to scold. Felix, seriously, she said, her voice dripping with that fake concern she uses when she's talking to someone she thinks is beneath her. You're making Mom cry. You know she's sensitive. Is that before or after she laughed at my son's toy? I asked. Oh, come on. She didn't mean anything by it. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just gifts. Then why are you so upset? She hesitated. Because you're humiliating our family. There it was. Not hurting the family. Humiliating them. I didn't humiliate anyone, I said. They did that themselves. She sighed dramatically. You always do this, Felix. Always the victim. You think the world owes you something because you didn't get the same things we did. Maybe if you had kids sooner or a wife who could contribute, Mom and Dad wouldn't feel so bad for Melissa's kids. That one hit deep. Not because it was true, but because of how effortlessly cruel it was. My ex-wife left years ago, and I'd worked hard to give Lucas stability since then. Melissa knew that. She just wanted to twist the knife. Thanks for the insight, Mel, I said quietly, then hung up. By the next morning, the post had gone viral. Not full-blown internet famous, but local viral. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments. Most people didn't know who I was, but they all understood the story. The comments flooded in. This breaks my heart. That little boy deserved better. Selective generosity is emotional abuse, not love. OP's parents sound like the type who reward loyalty, not effort. Reading those hit me harder than I expected. Strangers, total strangers, saw what my family had ignored for decades. And that terrified my parents. They started calling nonstop. Mom left voicemails alternating between crying and scolding. Dad texted me, "Take the post down or you're out of the will." Melissa chimed in with, "Don't come to New Year's dinner if you're planning to act like a victim again." I didn't answer any of them. That week, something strange happened. My aunt, Dad's sister, called me. We don't talk much, but she said she'd seen the photo through a mutual friend. Her voice was soft, careful. "I just wanted to say," she began, "I've noticed how they treat you over the years. You're not crazy. It's always been like that. Your mom and dad have always put Melissa on a pedestal. I think they do it because it makes them feel successful. You were independent, so they never thought you needed anything." Hearing that, it was like someone had lifted a weight I didn't know I was carrying. It wasn't all in my head. I thanked her, and she said, "Don't back down, Felix. Sometimes the only way to show people who they are is by holding up a mirror." Meanwhile, Lucas went back to school and showed his classmates his toy car. They were talking about what they got for Christmas, and when one of them asked, "That's all?" he just shrugged and said, "Yeah, but it's okay. My dad said we don't need big gifts to be happy." That broke me a little. I promised myself that no matter how this unfolded, I wouldn't let him see the worst of it. A few days later, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off a dish I'd borrowed during Christmas dinner. I didn't plan to stay long, just in and out. But when I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something odd. Tyler's car was there. Melissa's too. When I stepped inside, everyone was waiting in the living room. It felt like an ambush. Mom was sitting on the couch, tissue in hand, pretending to cry. Dad stood near the fireplace like he was presiding over a courtroom. Melissa sat next to Mom, arms crossed, already ready to attack. "Felix," Dad said coldly. "Sit." I stayed standing. "This has gone far enough," he continued. "Your little stunt online humiliated this family. Do you realize how many people have seen that photo? People from church are talking. The neighbors are talking. Your mother can't even go to the store without someone bringing it up." "Good," I said. "Maybe now she knows what it feels like to be embarrassed in front of others." "Don't be cruel," Melissa snapped. I turned to her. "Cruel? You all laughed while my son sat there pretending he wasn't hurt. And you think I'm cruel?" Mom finally spoke, her voice trembling just enough to sound performative. "We didn't mean to hurt anyone, Felix. You've always been so sensitive. You take everything personally. Maybe because you make everything personal," I said quietly. "Every holiday, every birthday, every family moment, there's always a ranking system, and Lucas and I are always at the bottom." Mom dabbed her eyes. "You're twisting everything. We love you all equally." Tyler, who'd been silent until then, muttered, "Then why'd you tell me last week that Melissa deserves more because she's got kids and you're just one guy with a computer job?" The room froze. Mom's face went pale. Dad's jaw clenched. Melissa turned on Tyler instantly. "Why would you say that?" He shrugged. "Because it's true. You said it, Mom. You said Felix doesn't need handouts. You said giving him less makes him stronger." She looked like she wanted to melt into the couch. I stared at her, waiting for her to deny it, but she didn't. She just whispered, "That's not how I meant it." Something shifted in that moment. The fragile image they'd built for themselves started to crack. And that was before I showed them what I'd brought with me that day, something that would change everything in the next part of this story. Because I hadn't come to return a dish. I'd come with proof. I didn't sit down. My dad was still standing by the fireplace like some kind of judge waiting to hand down a sentence. But for the first time in years, I wasn't the one on trial. I was calm. Too calm, probably. The kind of calm that comes when you've already been burned too many times to feel the fire anymore. Mom tried to speak again, her voice trembling. "Felix, we can talk about this privately. There's no need to drag the whole family into it." "Why not?" I asked. "You didn't mind dragging me in front of everyone when Dad made that little joke about how I should work harder so Lucas could get better gifts." Dad's face darkened. "That was just a joke. It wasn't funny," I said quietly. No one said anything for a long moment. The ticking clock in the hallway sounded like a metronome, keeping time for our collective discomfort. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Plain, white, unmarked. Mom's eyes flicked to it immediately. "What's that?" she asked. "The truth," I said, setting it on the coffee table. Since everyone seems so invested in pretending this is all just a misunderstanding. Melissa rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. What are you doing now, Felix?" Another dramatic stunt. I ignored her. I slid the envelope toward my dad. "Go ahead. Open it." He hesitated, then picked it up and pulled out the papers inside. Printouts, screenshots, and a few old photos. His expression shifted from confusion to irritation to something I hadn't seen before, unease. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked. "Receipts," I said simply. "Literal and metaphorical." Mom reached over, taking the pages from him, scanning them quickly. Her hand froze halfway down the second page. It was a printout from her email, one she'd sent to Melissa about a month before Christmas. "I want to do something special for the kids this year. Melissa, can you send me their wish lists? I'll make sure they get exactly what they asked for. Don't tell Felix. We'll say we're cutting back so he doesn't expect much." Silence. Her lips parted, like she wanted to come up with an excuse, but nothing came out. "How did you get this?" she finally whispered. "You accidentally sent it to the wrong email," I said. "You must have typed my address instead of Melissa's at some point. It landed in my spam folder. I didn't even see it until a few days ago." Dad crossed his arms. "You went snooping." I laughed, humorless. "You're seriously trying to twist this into me being the problem again?" Tyler leaned forward, squinting at the page. "Wait, is this real?" Mom didn't answer. Melissa did, her voice sharp. "You're making it sound like some evil plot." "It was just Mom trying to make Christmas nice for everyone." "Everyone," I said. "Or just your kids?" She shot back instantly. "Oh, give it a rest, Felix. You've always been jealous of me." That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Not because it was true, but because she genuinely believed it. She thought my frustration, my exhaustion, my disappointment, all of it, came from envy instead of decades of being treated like an afterthought. "You really think I'd be jealous of someone who can't go a single month without borrowing money from Mom and Dad?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've built your whole life on handouts and still act like you're entitled to more." She stood up then, eyes blazing. "You think you're better than us because you've got some middle-class job and one kid? Newsflash, Felix. You're just bitter because no one spoils you anymore." I almost said something cruel, but I caught Lucas's face in my mind. The look he gave me that night when he asked if he'd done something wrong. So instead, I just said, "You're right. No one spoils me. But that's not the problem. The problem is you've mistaken neglect for fairness." That's when Mom snapped. "Enough," she shouted, slamming her hand on the armrest. Her voice cracked, but the performance was gone. This was the real her, the sharp tone that used to make me freeze when I was 10. "You've always seen yourself as the victim, Felix. You think everything we do is some kind of attack on you. You've never once appreciated what we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked quietly. That shut her up for a second. "You didn't pay for college," I continued. "You said it would build character. You didn't help when my car broke down, even though you co-signed Melissa's SUV. You didn't come to my wedding because it was on the same weekend as Tyler's guy's trip. And every time I've needed something, just some emotional support, you've said, 'You're independent, Felix. You can handle it.'" My voice wavered, just a little. "So yeah, I handled it. I built a life on my own. I worked 2 jobs to afford that house. I made sure Lucas never had to see me break down." But watching him that morning, watching him try to smile while every other kid in the room got everything they wanted, something broke in me. Because that was the moment I realized you didn't just forget me. You forgot him too. Mom's eyes were wet now, but it wasn't guilt, it was anger. We didn't forget him. We just couldn't afford. "Stop," I said. "Don't say it. Don't lie again." Dad slammed the papers down on the table. "This conversation's over. You're not going to stand here and accuse your mother of being a liar." "She did lie," Tyler muttered. "I saw the email." "Stay out of this," Dad barked. Tyler leaned back, hands up. "Just saying." Mom stood now, her voice rising again. "You're twisting everything. We were trying to help Melissa because she's struggling." "Struggling?" I said, incredulous. "They just went to Disney last month." Dad glared. "That's enough." And that's when he said it, the sentence that changed everything. "You were never supposed to have that kid anyway." The room went still. I felt every word like a physical hit. "What did you just say?" I asked. He didn't back down. "You heard me. You weren't ready. You didn't plan for him. You didn't have the stability. We all said it was a mistake, but you wouldn't listen. And now you want to punish us for being right. I could feel my pulse in my ears. That kid is your grandson, I said, my voice shaking. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. And you just called him a mistake. Mom started crying again, but it was different now. Less sadness, more panic. He didn't mean it, Felix. Please, don't twist his words. But I wasn't listening anymore. It was like something inside me had gone cold. All the little comments over the years about how Lucas was too sensitive, how I shouldn't spoil him, how some kids just aren't cut out for fancy things. They all clicked into place. They didn't just think less of me. They thought less of him. And suddenly, I realized I didn't even want to be standing in that house anymore. I turned toward the door. Where are you going? Dad demanded. Home, I said. You're not walking out on your family. I turned back to him slowly. You're not my family anymore. Melissa gasped like I just cursed at the Pope. Oh, come on, Felix. Don't be dramatic. You're just upset. Upset. I said. No. Upset is when you forget someone's birthday. Upset is when you argue over dinner. This, I gestured toward the crumpled email in Mom's hands. This is betrayal. I walked to the door, but before I could leave, Tyler spoke up. Hey, Felix, he said quietly. You forgot your dish. I turned back, and for a moment, our eyes met. He didn't look smug or sarcastic. He looked sad, almost guilty. I shook my head. Keep it. Consider it my contribution to the family. Then I left. I didn't even realize how tight my chest had been until I got into my car and exhaled. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. For a few minutes, I just sat there, staring at the house through the windshield, watching the silhouettes move behind the curtains. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from Tyler. You were right. About everything. Check your email. When I got home and opened my laptop, there it was. An email from Tyler with no subject line, just a bunch of attachments. Bank statements, screenshots, scans of checks. And in that moment, I understood that this wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was theft. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table long after Lucas had gone to bed, the glow from my laptop screen lighting the dim room. Tyler's email was still open, staring back at me. 24 attachments, all meticulously labeled. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe he sent me the wrong thing. But as I started clicking through, the truth unfolded slowly, painfully. There were copies of checks from my parents' account made out to Melissa, not small ones, either. 5,000 here, 8,000 there, regularly. Some even marked loan repayment in the memo line. Others were labeled for kids' school or house fund. Then came the kicker, 2 checks to Tyler. One for a few hundred, another for 1,000. Both labeled miscellaneous help. And me? Nothing. Not one single transaction. That part didn't surprise me. But what did was the date on one of the larger checks. 2 weeks before Christmas. $10,000. The note said Melissa, gifts and expenses. My parents hadn't just lied about being tight on money. They deliberately funneled thousands to my sister so she could play Santa while telling me not to expect much. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my face. It felt like my entire childhood was printed across those documents. Every quiet disappointment, every dismissive comment, every time they told me I was so independent while secretly propping up my siblings behind the scenes. But what cut deepest wasn't even the money. It was the confirmation that they'd looked at my son, their grandson, and decided he didn't deserve the same joy as the others. For a long while, I just sat there staring at the screen, numb. Then I opened the next folder Tyler had attached. Conversations, screenshots, text threads. The first one was between him and Mom. Mom, Tyler, can you make sure Felix doesn't find out what we're doing for Christmas this year? I don't want any drama. Tyler, why would he care? Mom, he'll make it about money. He always does. Tyler, you mean fairness? Mom, you're just like him lately. Don't start. I scrolled down, reading line after line of her justifying the favoritism like it was some kind of kindness. Mom, Melissa's kids need to feel special. They notice things. Felix's boy is quiet. He won't mind. He won't mind. I pushed away from the table and stood up. My stomach twisted like I was going to be sick. I walked over to the window. The street outside was empty, the world silent. Snowflakes drifted past the glass in lazy spirals, collecting on the porch steps. It was peaceful out there, a cruel contrast to the storm brewing inside my chest. For years, I told myself my parents' favoritism was just subtle, maybe unintentional. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was too sensitive. But seeing it all in black and white, their words, their money, their intentions, it felt like reading a confession letter from someone who'd never even realized they were confessing. I closed my laptop. The noise of it snapping shut was louder than it should have been. Then I walked down the hall to Lucas's room. He was asleep, curled up under his blanket, one arm draped around that little toy police car. The paint was already chipped. One of the wheels was gone, but he'd taken it to bed every night since Christmas. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching him breathe. For the first time in my life, I understood what rock bottom really felt like. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even sadness. It was the hollow quiet that comes after the last straw snaps. When you stop waiting for things to get better because you finally realize they never will. I whispered softly, "You deserve so much more, buddy." He stirred, half awake, and murmured, "Love you, Dad." That broke me. I sat there for a while, trying not to cry, but eventually I did. Quietly, carefully. Because if there was one thing I didn't want, it was for him to wake up and see his dad crying over a family that never deserved him in the first place. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I told Lucas he could stay home from school for a dad day. We built Legos, made pancakes, watched a movie. For the first time in a week, he laughed. That real, belly-deep laugh that kids have when they feel safe. And while he was playing, I sat back down at the kitchen table, opened the laptop, and started planning. Not revenge. Not yet. Just clarity. I went through my finances, my old photos, old text threads with my parents. I wanted to understand exactly how far this pattern went. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. There was a text from Mom a year ago. "Sorry, we can't contribute to Lucas's birthday this time. Things are tight." That same week, Melissa had posted a photo of her new kitchen renovation. "Thanks, Mom and Dad," in the caption. Another year, Mom telling me she couldn't afford to help with Lucas's school trip. Then Melissa tagging them in a photo of a Disney cruise. Each time, the same words. "Money's tight." And each time, I believed them. By the afternoon, I was emotionally drained. Lucas was in the living room watching cartoons, humming along, blissfully unaware of everything. I envied that, the innocence of not knowing. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Tyler again. "Tyler, you okay?" Me, "Not really." "Tyler, I figured. You saw everything?" Me, "Yeah." "Why did you send it?" "Tyler, because I'm done pretending. I used to think you exaggerated. I see it now. They treat you like a stranger." Me, "You didn't have to get involved." "Tyler, I did. They're already blaming me for turning you against them. Might as well earn it." That last message hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, I realized Tyler wasn't the same spoiled kid who used to roll his eyes whenever I brought this stuff up. He looked tired too. Maybe years of being coddled had worn thin, or maybe he was just finally old enough to see how warped it all was. We texted for a while, quietly, him venting about Mom's manipulation, me trying to process it all. Then he said something that stuck. "You don't have to keep taking it, man. Just because they're family doesn't mean they get to keep breaking you." He was right. That night, after Lucas went to bed again, I opened my phone to see new notifications. Dozens. My post, the one about selective generosity, had blown up even more. People were sharing it on parenting pages, local forums, Reddit threads. I scrolled through the comments. I had the same kind of mom. She always said be grateful while giving my brother everything. "Opie, your son will remember how you handled this. You're teaching him self-respect. You can't fix people who need someone to feel lesser so they can feel good about themselves." I didn't respond to anyone, but I read every word. It was strange. Validation from strangers felt more like family than anything I'd gotten from my actual family in years. Then, around midnight, Mom texted again. "Mom, I hope you're happy. Your father hasn't eaten since that argument." I barely slept. "Melissa's kids are asking why you hate them." I stared at the message for a while before replying. Me, "I don't hate anyone. I'm just done pretending." No reply. The next day, she called. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. "Felix, listen, we made mistakes, all right? But you're taking things too far. You're making us out to be villains. You need to take that post down before this gets any worse. Please, for your son's sake." For my son's sake. The irony of that nearly made me laugh. When I didn't answer, she sent another message, this time from Dad's phone. "Dad, if you're going to continue disrespecting this family, "Don't bother showing up again." I read it twice. Then I deleted it. That evening, I took Lucas to the park. It was cold, the air biting, the snow crunching under our boots. He ran around chasing pigeons while I sat on a bench watching him. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to peace. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them anymore. Not directly. I wasn't going to beg them to see the truth or try to fix what was already broken. I tried for years, and all it had done was cost me peace. But that didn't mean I was done. Quietly, methodically, I started preparing to cut the cord and to make sure everyone saw exactly who my parents really were before I did. Over the next week, I gathered everything Tyler had sent, combined it with my own proof, texts, receipts, old messages. I created a folder on my desktop called The Truth. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with it yet, but something inside me told me I'd know when the time came. In the meantime, I focused on Lucas. I picked him up early from school, helped him with homework, made hot chocolate, let him pick out a new toy, one he actually wanted. Watching his face light up reminded me that love didn't need to be expensive to be meaningful. It just had to be genuine. One night, he asked, "Dad, are we seeing Grandma and Grandpa again soon?" I hesitated. "Not for a little while, buddy. We're giving them some space." He thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, can we invite Auntie Sarah instead? My ex's sister, who'd always been kind to him." "Yeah," I said softly. "We can do that." He smiled and went back to his drawing, humming to himself. I watched him for a long time, realizing that the less time he spent around my family, the brighter he seemed. Still, late at night, I'd catch myself thinking about everything. The years I'd wasted trying to earn their approval, the quiet humiliations, the countless "be grateful" speeches. It all added up to this moment. Me, alone in my kitchen, sipping cold coffee, with an overflowing folder of evidence sitting on my desktop like a ticking clock. I wasn't ready to press the button yet, but I would be. Because rock bottom doesn't just break you. It clears the ground so you can finally rebuild. And as I stared at that folder labeled The Truth, I realized something I hadn't before. I didn't want revenge just to hurt them. I wanted justice, not for me, but for Lucas. They'd made him feel small once. I was going to make sure they never had that power again. By the time January rolled around, the snow had turned to slush and the world outside started to thaw. But inside my little house, something new was growing. A quiet kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. After that Christmas disaster, I expected things to get harder. I expected the guilt trips, the calls, the endless cycle of emotional manipulation. But instead, silence. Real, eerie silence. My parents didn't call. Melissa didn't text. Even Dad stopped sending his passive-aggressive, "hope you've learned something" messages. At first, it felt strange, like standing in a room where the hum of an old machine had suddenly stopped. But after a week or two, the quiet turned freeing. I started sleeping better. My appetite came back. And Lucas, he was blooming. Without the shadow of my parents' judgment, he seemed lighter, happier. I didn't realize how much their presence had been affecting him until it was gone. He stopped asking when we'd visit Grandma and Grandpa. Instead, he started talking about new things, wanting to build a birdhouse, learning guitar, maybe even joining the soccer team. We filled our weekends with simple things. Pancake mornings, library trips, movie nights. I started cooking again, real meals, not just microwave leftovers. The house felt alive for the first time in forever. One evening, while we were painting the birdhouse together, Lucas said, "Dad, this is more fun than Christmas was." I smiled. "Yeah? You think so?" He nodded. "It's just us. I like that better." Something in me loosened. For so long, I'd measured family by obligation, showing up, keeping peace, tolerating disrespect. But sitting there with paint on my hands and my son's laughter filling the room, I realized this was family. Not blood, not titles, just love, safety, and presence. That same week, something unexpected happened. Remember that photo I posted, the one that blew up? A local parenting blog had picked it up and written an article about it. The Selective Generosity Christmas, they called it. It wasn't sensationalized, just honest. They didn't use names, but they quoted my post and talked about emotional inequality in families. The story hit a nerve. Within days, there were hundreds of comments from people sharing their own experiences, parents, children, even grandparents admitting they'd made similar mistakes. The story got shared on Twitter, Facebook, even Reddit. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was everyone's. I didn't say anything publicly. I didn't need to. But privately, it gave me a strange sense of validation. The years of gaslighting, the accusations of "you're just overreacting," the guilt trips, all of it felt like it finally had a name. People saw it for what it was. Meanwhile, work was going better than ever. I'd been in the same IT position for almost 7 years, reliable, but overlooked, kind of like how my family treated me. But after Christmas, something clicked. I started staying late again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I began proposing solutions instead of just fixing problems. My boss noticed. By February, I was leading a project to overhaul our internal systems. It wasn't glamorous, but it was big. I poured myself into it, channeling all that leftover anger and disappointment into something productive. Lucas would sit on the couch doing homework while I worked at the table. He'd ask questions about what I was doing, and I'd explain in kid terms, "Dad's teaching computers how to talk to each other." He loved that idea. Then, one day in March, my boss pulled me aside. "Felix," he said, "you've been killing it lately. The higher-ups noticed. We're promoting you to systems manager. Comes with a pay bump and a small team." I just stood there for a moment, stunned. That night, Lucas and I celebrated with pizza and ice cream. He insisted we cheers with our soda cans. "Does this mean we can get a new couch now?" he asked with a grin. I laughed. "Maybe. But first we're getting you a new bike." It was more than a promotion, it was proof. Proof that I didn't need my family's approval or support to build something good. I could stand on my own. I was standing on my own. And just like that, things began to shift even more. Tyler and I started talking regularly. Not just about our parents, but about life. He'd begun freelancing seriously, building a client base instead of coasting on handouts. He told me, "I think you scared me straight, man." He wasn't wrong. For years, he'd been in the comfort zone my parents built for him. But when I confronted them, and when Mom blamed him for fueling my rebellion, he finally saw the strings attached to that comfort. We became closer than we'd ever been. He even came over a few times to hang out with Lucas. The two of them clicked instantly. "Uncle Ty's cool," Lucas told me one night. "He talks to me like I'm a person, not a baby." I smiled. "Yeah, he's learning." Meanwhile, Melissa was quiet. I didn't hear from her directly, but through Tyler, I knew things weren't going great for her. Her husband's insurance business was struggling. The house payments were piling up. Apparently, she'd even gone to our parents asking for another temporary loan. And for once, Mom said no. Tyler told me that Dad was furious after my post went viral, not just because of the attention, but because people at his church had recognized the story. Word got around. People whispered. And that, apparently, was unacceptable for a man like him. "They're embarrassed," Tyler said over the phone one night. "They care more about reputation than anything. You hit them where it hurts." "I didn't mean to humiliate them," I said. "I know, but they did that to themselves." He was right. By April, I was in a completely different place mentally. I'd paid off my car, started saving for a vacation, and finally signed Lucas up for that soccer team. Watching him run around on the field, shouting and laughing with the other kids, I felt something I hadn't felt since before my marriage fell apart. Pride without pain attached to it. Every small victory felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Then, one evening, while I was cooking dinner, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something told me to answer. "Hello, Felix." The voice was faint, shaky. It was my mom. I froze. She sounded older, fragile in a way I hadn't heard before. "I know you probably don't want to talk," she said, "but I just wanted to say we've been thinking about you." "About Lucas?" I stayed silent. She sighed. "We saw the news. Congratulations on your promotion." I almost laughed. The way she said it, as if she'd heard about a distant acquaintance's good fortune. "Thanks," I said flatly. There was a pause. Then, quietly, "You were right about a lot of things." That caught me off guard. She continued, her voice trembling. "We shouldn't have treated you that way. I thought I was doing what was best. I didn't realize how much it hurt you." I didn't respond right away. For a second, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered Christmas morning. The laughter, the dollar store toy, Dad's smirk when he said be grateful he got anything. "Mom," I said finally, "I appreciate you saying that. But I can't go back to pretending everything's fine." "I don't expect you to," she said quickly. I'd like to see you. And Lucas. Maybe for dinner sometime. Just us." I'll think about it, I said, though we both knew I wouldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. After we hung up, I stood there for a while, staring at the stove as the pasta boiled over. I wasn't angry, just tired. But beneath that tiredness was something new, clarity. They were trying to reach out not because they missed me, but because they felt the walls closing in. The story had taken a life of its own online. People were connecting dots, even though I'd never named names. Small-town gossip has a way of filling in blanks. Still, I didn't care about payback at that moment. I was finally living without them, and it felt good. Then, one Friday evening, Tyler came over with a grin. "Guess what?" he said, dropping a thick envelope on my table. "What's this?" "Bank statements," he said, "from Dad's business account. You might want to take a look." I frowned. "Why are you giving me this?" He leaned back. "Because you deserve to know where all those tight finances went." I hesitated before opening it. Inside were more documents, transfers, payments, records going back years. But one thing stood out immediately: my name. Apparently, my father had opened a joint account in my name years ago, without telling me, and had been moving money through it. To pay Melissa, to pay Tyler, even to cover his own expenses. He'd been using my name. My stomach dropped. "Is this legal?" Tyler shook his head. "Barely, but it's enough to ruin his reputation if anyone ever saw it." I sat there, the realization sinking in like slow poison. They hadn't just disrespected me, they'd used me. And suddenly, that quiet folder on my desktop labeled the truth didn't feel like a safety net anymore. It felt like a weapon, one I was finally ready to use. Because I wasn't the broken son anymore. I was the one holding all the cards. The next few days after Tyler dropped that envelope were a blur. I went through every page, line by line, until my eyes ached. The transactions were all there, thousands of dollars funneled from my dad's business into personal accounts, Melissa's mortgage, even Tyler's freelance equipment. Some of them, disturbingly, were under my name. He'd used that joint account to move funds as if I'd been complicit. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the emotional, explosive sense. I was cold, focused. It was like every nerve had gone quiet, and all that remained was strategy. For years, I'd been the one who swallowed my pride for the sake of keeping peace. But now, I had the receipts, the lies, the proof. And unlike them, I wasn't interested in starting a fight. I was going to end one. I didn't rush it. That's the thing about revenge. The best kind doesn't come from fury. It comes from clarity. First, I met with someone I trusted, an old college friend named Hannah who worked in accounting. We sat at a coffee shop, and I laid everything out. She scanned through the documents, frowning deeper with every page. "Felix, this is bad. If your dad's been moving money like this through your name, it's not just unethical. It could technically qualify as tax evasion, depending on what he reported." My stomach tightened. "Could it affect me legally?" "Potentially, yeah," she said. "But you've got proof you didn't authorize any of it. These records show the withdrawals came from his IP address and his office location. You're clear." "But he isn't." I exhaled slowly. She looked at me carefully. "You planning to go to the authorities?" I hesitated. "Not yet." "Then what?" I smiled faintly. "Let's just say I want him to understand what it feels like to lose something he thinks he owns." Over the next week, I worked quietly. Tyler helped. He'd already distanced himself from our parents, and after realizing Dad had used him too, he was all in. We combed through public business filings, property records, anything with my father's name on it. And that's when we found something interesting. His company wasn't doing as well as he made it seem. He'd been juggling money between accounts to make it look profitable. The Christmas money for Melissa? It came from a business expense reimbursement, one he claimed was paid to me. My dad had literally written my name into his tax fraud. That was the moment I knew exactly how to hit back. But I didn't go scorched earth. That's what they'd expect. They'd expect rage, confrontation, chaos. Instead, I went subtle, surgical. The first step was reputation. I didn't post anything new myself. I didn't have to. The parenting article about selective generosity was still quietly making rounds online. I simply sent an anonymous email to a few local journalists who'd written about small-town family businesses before. I attached a handful of the wrong bank transfers, the ones marked with my name on business reimbursements. Subject line: "Might be worth looking into. This company's books don't add up." That was all it took. Within 2 weeks, the local paper ran a piece titled "Community Business Faces Financial Questions." It didn't name my father directly at first, but anyone who knew him recognized the details: the business name, the size, the family-run angle. The piece asked gentle questions, citing unexplained transfers and inconsistencies in reported expenses. The fallout was immediate. Dad called me first. I didn't answer. Then he left a voicemail, his voice trembling with fury. "I know this was you. You're playing with fire, Felix. You'll regret this." For once, I didn't feel afraid. Instead, I opened my laptop, clicked into my The Truth folder, and hit upload. I didn't post it publicly. Not yet. I uploaded it to a secure cloud link, one only I controlled, and sent it privately to the same journalist. This time, with more context. "Since your article ran, I thought you should see these. Bank statements showing transfers in my name. Messages from family confirming the misuse. Screenshots proving I never authorized anything. No signature. Just an email address I'd created for this purpose." Then I shut the laptop and took Lucas to soccer practice. By the next morning, it was everywhere. The follow-up article dropped at 8 a.m. Business owner under investigation for misuse of funds. This time, my dad's name was front and center. I didn't even have to share it. Everyone in town did that for me. Tyler texted me at noon. "He's losing it. He thinks Melissa leaked something. Mom's crying. It's chaos." I didn't reply. At work, I kept my head down. My promotion had come with a small private office, and I spent that day focused on spreadsheets and reports, calm, efficient, composed. But inside, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. That evening, I came home to a stack of voicemails. Mom, Melissa, even Dad again. I didn't listen to any of them. I just sat down with Lucas and helped him build his new Lego set. "Dad," he asked, "are Grandma and Grandpa still mad?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but that's not our problem anymore." He nodded thoughtfully, then went back to building. A few days later, Tyler called again. "You might want to know," he said. "Dad's business license is under review. They're auditing his accounts." I leaned back, staring out the window. Good. Maybe he'll finally learn that actions have consequences. Tyler hesitated. "You sure you're okay with all this?" "I'm not happy about it," I said honestly. "But I'm at peace with it. Because here's the thing, I didn't destroy him. He did that himself. I just handed the truth to the right people. And when the truth is ugly enough, it doesn't need help catching fire." By the end of spring, my father's company had quietly shut down for restructuring. Melissa deleted her Instagram for a while after people started leaving comments like, "Hope your next vacation isn't paid for by fake invoices." My mom, from what Tyler said, was humiliated beyond words. Me? I kept living my life. Lucas finished his soccer season. My team at work launched the project successfully. I started running in the mornings, feeling lighter each day. One Saturday, while we were walking back from the park, Lucas said, "Dad, when people do bad things, do they always get caught?" I smiled a little. "Not always right away," I said. "But the truth has a way of finding them eventually." He nodded like he understood, even if he didn't fully. That night, I checked my email one last time. A new message was waiting, from the journalist. "Thank you for your information. The investigation is ongoing, but I wanted you to know it made a difference." I stared at the screen for a while, then closed it. Because the revenge wasn't about making them suffer anymore. It was about balance. About showing that you can't keep taking from someone who finally knows their worth. I didn't need to confront them again. I didn't need an apology that would never be sincere. All I needed was peace, and maybe, just maybe, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the family who taught me to be grateful for anything would now have to learn what it meant to lose everything. And as I turned off the light and checked on Lucas one more time, I realized something simple and powerful. The best revenge wasn't destroying them. It was rebuilding myself so completely that their absence finally felt like relief. The fallout came slower than I expected, not in a single explosion, but in ripples that spread quietly, touching everything my parents had built and believed in. For the first few weeks after the article dropped, they stayed silent. It was the calm before the storm. Then, the storm arrived. It started with a letter, not to me, but to them. The State Revenue Department opened an official investigation into my father's business practices. Apparently, the journalist had done more digging than I realized, and the documents I provided had made their way into the hands of people who had the power to act. Tyler called me the day my parents got the notice. "You should have seen Dad's face," he said. He opened it right at breakfast. Went pale as a ghost. Mom kept asking, "What is it?" And he just kept saying, "It's nothing. It's a mistake." But it wasn't nothing. Over the next few weeks, they were audited. Every account, every reimbursement, every dollar that had conveniently vanished into family members' pockets. Melissa got pulled into it too, since several checks had gone straight to her account. Their perfect family reputation started to crumble from the inside out. The neighbors talked. People at church whispered. The same people my parents once tried so hard to impress now crossed the street to avoid them. At first, they tried to control the narrative. Dad told anyone who'd listened that it was all a misunderstanding, that jealous competitors had sabotaged him. But then the facts came out. The investigators found a trail of falsified transactions, not enough to land him in prison, but enough to cost him everything that mattered to him: credibility, stability, and pride. The business license was revoked. The family name that once stood for respect in our small town was suddenly synonymous with deceit. And I didn't lift a finger. Tyler kept me updated occasionally, though I asked him not to tell me too much. I didn't need to revel in their downfall. I just wanted distance. Still, part of me couldn't help but wonder how they were handling it. Then one afternoon in June, I got my answer. Mom showed up at my door. I hadn't seen her in months. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence. The kind of shrinkage that happens when pride collapses in on itself. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup uneven, her hair tied back like she hadn't bothered much that morning. "Felix," she said quietly when I opened the door. "Mom." We stood there for a long moment, neither of us moving. Behind me, Lucas was on the couch watching TV. He glanced toward the door, saw her, and froze. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "I shouldn't be here," she started, wringing her hands. But I didn't know what else to do. I didn't say anything. She looked up at me with a trembling lip. "Everything's gone, Felix. Your father's business, the accounts, the clients, all gone. They froze the assets. We might lose the house." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said softly, though my voice was neutral. She winced. "I know you probably think we deserve it." "I don't think anything," I said. "I just think actions have consequences." Her eyes watered. "I didn't know he was using your name like that." I swear I didn't. I believed her. But that didn't make it any better. "You knew what he was," I said. "You just chose not to see it. Because it benefited you." She swallowed hard. "You have every right to hate us." I sighed, shaking my head. "I don't hate you, Mom. I just don't trust you anymore." Her shoulders sagged. For a moment, she looked like she might reach out, maybe to hug me, maybe to beg, but she didn't. "I just wanted to see you," she said quietly. "And Lucas." I hesitated, then shook my head. "Not today." Her face crumpled. "Please, Felix. He's still your father. He's not well." That caught my attention. "What do you mean?" "He's been having panic attacks," she said, voice trembling. "Barely sleeping. The stress, the shame, it's breaking him. He doesn't talk to anyone. Just sits in the den staring at the floor." I stayed silent, processing that. There was a time when hearing that would have filled me with guilt, or pity, or maybe even a desire to fix things. But not now. Because for the first time, I realized something profound. His suffering didn't heal anything. It didn't erase what he did, or what he said. It didn't make him a different person. It was just the echo of his own choices. After a long pause, I said quietly, "Maybe now he knows what it's like to be powerless." She flinched at that. Then, after a long moment, she nodded. "Maybe he does." We stood there a bit longer, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "Take care of yourself," I said finally. She looked at me, eyes glassy. "Do you really want this to be the end?" I met her gaze. "It already ended. I'm just choosing peace now." I opened the door and stepped back inside. She stayed there for a moment, her hand hovering as if she might knock again, then turned and walked slowly down the path toward her car. I watched from the window as she got in and drove off. Lucas looked up at me. "Was that Grandma?" "Yeah," I said softly. "Is she coming back?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. "No, buddy. I don't think so." He nodded, accepting it with a child's resilience. Then he smiled. "Can we finish our puzzle?" I smiled back. "Yeah, let's finish it." That night, after Lucas went to bed, I sat on the couch and let everything sink in. The noise, the years of walking on eggshells, the guilt, the constant struggle for approval, it was all gone. For once, my house felt like a home instead of a refuge. A few weeks later, Tyler came by. He looked better than I'd seen him in years. Calmer, more grounded. He told me he'd moved out of our parents' place completely and was renting a small apartment nearby. "Melissa's furious with me," he said, grinning faintly. "Apparently I'm a traitor, but it's worth it." "How's Dad?" I asked. He sighed, still pretending he's the victim. But he's quiet now. You know how loud silence gets when someone's ego finally breaks. I nodded. Then Tyler said something that stuck with me. "You didn't just get revenge, Felix. You ended the cycle." That hit me harder than I expected. Because he was right. I hadn't just exposed them. I'd stopped it from touching Lucas. From teaching him that love comes with conditions or that respect means silence. I'd broken something toxic that had been passed down quietly for decades. Later that summer, Lucas and I took a trip. Nothing fancy, just a cabin by a lake a few hours away. We spent our days fishing, skipping rocks, roasting marshmallows. No phones, no noise, no ghosts from the past. One evening, as the sun set over the water, Lucas said, "Dad, this is my favorite day ever." I smiled. "Yeah? What makes it your favorite?" He thought for a moment. "Because it feels like everything's okay." I looked out at the orange horizon, the reflection shimmering across the lake, and realized he was right. For the first time, everything was okay. When we got home a week later, I found an envelope in the mailbox. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. My father's. Inside was a single piece of paper. Not a letter, not an apology. Just a short note. "You were right. About all of it. Dad." That was it. No excuses. No explanations. Just 7 words. I folded the note and placed it in a drawer. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder that sometimes the greatest power comes from no longer needing validation from the people who once held it over you. The next morning, I woke early, brewed coffee, and stood by the window watching the sunrise paint the sky gold. Lucas wandered in, hair messy, yawning. "Morning, Dad," he said. "Morning, champ." He climbed into my lap, and we sat there together, watching the light spill into the kitchen. It wasn't a cinematic ending. There was no dramatic music, no sudden redemption arc for anyone. Just peace. Real, earned peace. And as the sun rose higher, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anything. Not approval, not closure, not justice. I already had everything I needed. I glanced down at my son, smiling. "Hey, Lucas." "Yeah. You remember that toy police car from Christmas?" He grinned. "Yeah, the one with the broken wheel." I nodded. "We should keep it." As a reminder. Of what? I looked out the window, the sunlight catching the steam from my coffee. That no matter how small people make you feel, you always get to decide what you're worth. And with that, I finally closed that chapter of my life for good. Because the best revenge wasn't what I did to them, it was what I built afterward. Peace, success, freedom, and a life where my son would never have to be grateful for anything. He'd simply be loved. My name's Kevin, I'm 31, and if there's one thing I've learned the hard way, it's that family doesn't always mean safe, or kind, or even fair. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect you the most are the ones who grind you down until there's almost nothing left. I used to think I was the problem. Too sensitive, too distant, too unwilling to just let things go. But after what happened last Christmas, I stopped doubting myself. I finally saw them for who they really are. Growing up, my older brother Nathan was the golden child. Everything he touched was praised, even when it fell apart. He crashed our dad's car at 17. They said he was just young and exploring. I got a B+ in calculus and was grounded for a week. Nathan skipped college, drifted through jobs, and still got applause for every minor success. I, on the other hand, put myself through university with scholarships and side gigs and still felt like a ghost in my own home. I moved out right after graduation and never really came back. At least not for long. Visits home always felt like walking into a trap. There'd be passive-aggressive digs about how I think I'm better or awkward silences when I mentioned my work in tech. My parents never really asked about what I did, but they sure knew when to reach out. Like when they needed help fixing their roof. Or when Nathan needed a little extra cash to get his business off the ground. Spoiler, that business was selling knockoff designer watches from a garage, and it lasted about 2 months. I tried to set boundaries a few years back. Told them I was happy to help sometimes, but I wasn't their backup plan. Nathan took that personally. Suddenly I was arrogant, ungrateful, and too big for family. So I started pulling back even more. Calls turned into texts. Texts turned into silence. And then last December happened. About 2 weeks before Christmas, I got a group message from my parents about the annual family dinner. My name was tagged along with a note that said, "We're doing it at our place again this year. Everyone's contributing. Hope you can bring something useful." Seemed normal until I noticed what Nathan had replied just below. "Don't bother coming unless you're finally useful," he'd written. No emoji. No joke. Just that. At first, I stared at it, half expecting a follow-up. A JK or something. But nothing came. No one said anything. Not even my parents. And that's when it hit me, they were fine with it. Or maybe they agreed. I didn't reply. I wasn't going to engage. But the very next day, my mom called me. Her voice was overly sweet in that performative way she always used when she wanted something. "Honey," she said, "I hope you're still coming for Christmas. Oh, and Nathan's been working really hard lately. You know how the market's been. He finally found a place he loves, but he needs a co-signer on the mortgage. We all thought, maybe this is a good opportunity for you to really be there for your brother." It wasn't a request. It was dressed up like one, but I could hear it in her tone. This expectation that I'd say yes. That I'd come crawling back to the same cycle of giving while they barely noticed the toll it took. I didn't say much. Just listened. Nodded. Said I'd think about it. And later that night, I did. I really sat down and thought about every time I helped, every time I bit my tongue, every time I let something slide. And then I logged into my banking app, transferred exactly 1 cent to Nathan's account. I still had it from the last loan I gave him, and typed a note with the payment. "Hope this helps." I didn't think he'd notice it right away, but he did. Or maybe he was already waiting. My phone rang an hour later. "Nathan." I almost didn't answer, but some petty, curious part of me wanted to hear his reaction. "Are you kidding me?" he shouted as soon as I picked up. "A penny? You think this is funny? I'm about to get my first real place, and you're messing with me like this?" I stayed silent. Let him talk. He ranted for nearly a minute before I calmly said, "You told me not to come unless I was useful. That's me, being useful." He went quiet. For a second, I thought maybe he hung up. Then his voice dropped low, tense. "You think this ends here?" he said. "You think you're better than us just because you've got some fancy apartment and a job with a chair that leans back? You think you can humiliate me like this and walk away?" I rolled my eyes and was about to hang up when he suddenly said something that made my stomach twist. Something that made me freeze with the phone still at my ear. He said, "Maybe if you'd helped out when Dad needed the loan last spring, he wouldn't have had to put the house in my name." I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" There was a pause. And then he realized. He messed up. He said something he wasn't supposed to say. "Never mind," he mumbled. "Forget it." But I couldn't forget it. Because last spring, my dad did call me. Asked me for a loan, $30,000. Said it was urgent, but wouldn't tell me why. I said no, not unless I got the details. He never called back after that. Now I had a sick feeling crawling up my spine. Because that house, the one I grew up in, wasn't supposed to be in Nathan's name. It was supposed to go to both of us. Jointly. That was in Grandpa's will. I remembered it clearly. My dad was executor. He was just supposed to hold it in trust until we were both over 30. I was 31 now. Nathan was 34. And suddenly, 1,000 little things began to click together in my mind. Phrases I'd ignored, paperwork I was never shown, phone calls that ended too fast. Something was off. Something big. But I didn't say anything on the call. Not yet. I hung up without another word. Then I sat in silence for a long time, my mind racing. And I knew exactly what I needed to do next. But I didn't realize just how deep this betrayal would go. The next morning, I took the day off work. I told my assistant I had a family emergency, not entirely a lie, and drove straight to my storage unit across town. I hadn't been there in almost 2 years, but I remembered exactly what I was looking for. The thick, dusty file labeled Estate, Grandpa M. I kept it all these years, mostly out of paranoia, but now I was grateful I had. Inside were copies of the original will, letters from the attorney, and a certified summary that spelled everything out in plain legal language. The house would be held in trust by my father until both Nathan and I turned 30. After that, the ownership was to be split 50-50, no exceptions, no conditions. I read it 3 times, then took photos of every page. My hands were cold, but my chest was burning. He put the house in Nathan's name? How? Why? And more importantly, when I called a friend of mine, Maya. We weren't super close, but she was a real estate attorney, and more importantly, she had zero patience for people who played games with inheritance. She agreed to meet that afternoon. I brought the folder, laid out everything I knew, and watched her brows knit tighter with each page she scanned. Kevin, she said finally, this isn't just shady. If your dad transferred full ownership to Nathan without disclosing this will, that could be grounds for legal action, especially if he used it to secure a mortgage. I asked if that included fraud. She looked me dead in the eye. If he claimed to be the sole owner while knowing he wasn't? Yeah, that's fraud. The rest of the conversation was a blur, legal options, possible timelines, what I could request in court. I nodded along, half listening, but my mind kept going back to Nathan's voice on the phone. You think this ends here? Maybe he didn't mean it as a threat, but it felt like one now. That night, I didn't sleep. I scrolled through old emails, texts, anything that hinted at what had been going on behind my back. There it was, a message from 6 months ago, from my mom. Just FYI, Nathan's finally buying a place. So proud of him. He's really grown up lately. You should call him. I hadn't. I didn't even reply. But now that message read like a flashing red warning. So Nathan had used our childhood home, the house meant for both of us, as leverage to get a mortgage. And he did it knowing full well what Grandpa intended. And my parents, they went along with it. I felt hollow, like I'd been written out of my own life story. The next step wasn't easy. I knew what I wanted to do, but I also knew how this would play out. My parents wouldn't just be disappointed, they'd be furious. Because in their eyes, it wasn't about what was fair. It was about loyalty, unity, keeping family matters private. But they didn't care about privacy when they sent me that co-signing request. Or when Nathan told me not to come to Christmas unless I was useful. I didn't respond to anyone for a few days. Let the silence build. Then, on the Friday before Christmas Eve, I finally replied in the group chat. Just 3 things. Thanks for the invite, but I won't be coming to Christmas this year. I'm reviewing legal documents related to Grandpa's estate. We'll need to talk, soon. Nathan, enjoy the penny. Consider it an early inheritance. Within minutes, the phone call started. First Mom, then Dad, then Nathan. I didn't answer any of them. But the voicemails piled up like thunderclouds. Mom saying I was ruining the holiday. Dad telling me I didn't understand the full picture. Nathan demanding to know what I thought I was doing. But none of them actually denied it. Not once. That was the part that stuck with me. They tried to distract, to guilt, to minimize. But not one of them said, that's not true. On Christmas Eve, while they were probably pouring wine and carving ham, I was at home finalizing paperwork with Maya. We were filing a formal complaint with the county clerk's office and requesting a freeze on any legal activity involving the property until the matter could be reviewed. It wasn't the final move, but it was the first one. A warning shot across the bow. I didn't feel good. Not exactly. There's no joy in realizing your own family would rather erase you than treat you fairly. But there was something else, a sense of clarity, of finally choosing myself. Then, just after midnight, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Nathan. No voice memo. No emojis. Just 5 words. You don't know everything, Kevin. And something about that sent a chill down my spine. I didn't reply, but I had the strangest feeling, like this was bigger than I thought. Like he still had one more card to play. And whatever it was, I wasn't going to like it. The message stayed with me for days. You don't know everything, Kevin. At first, I dismissed it. Just another vague threat, another one of Nathan's attempts to sound smarter than he was. But the way it was phrased, it had weight. Not angry or spiteful. Almost like a warning. And that's what messed with me most. Because if Nathan wasn't bluffing, then what didn't I know? I tried to push the thought away and stay focused. The legal process was in motion. Maya had submitted the request for a property title review, and we'd sent a formal letter to my father asking for all documentation relating to the transfer of the house. I gave them a deadline, January 3rd. Until then, I wasn't talking to anyone. No texts, no calls, no back and forth. But silence, it turns out, is a weapon in itself. Especially when you come from a family like mine, where keeping the peace was always just code for let Nathan win. My mother left me 3 voicemails on New Year's Eve alone. The first was emotional. I can't believe you're doing this to your own brother. The second was cold. I hope you realize you're tearing the family apart. And the third one caught me off guard. It was short. barely 10 seconds. But her voice cracked near the end. If you push this, if you dig into things, you're going to regret it. That was the first time I started to wonder if Nathan's mistake on the phone wasn't a mistake at all. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe they thought I'd back off if I felt a little threatened. But they didn't know me anymore. They didn't know the years I'd spent rebuilding myself after they'd broken me down. They didn't know the way I'd learned to take my own side, to trust my gut, even when everyone told me to shut up and smile. I wasn't backing off this time. Not now. Not after everything. On January 2nd, one day before the deadline, something strange happened. I got an email. No name. No subject line. Just a single PDF attachment. The address looked like a throwaway burner account. I scanned the file on 2 separate antivirus programs before I opened it, just to be safe. Inside was a scanned copy of a document I'd never seen before, a notarized quitclaim deed. Dated April 17th, signed by my father, transferring sole ownership of the house to Nathan for love and consideration. There was no mention of the will, no legal disclosures, no trustee information, just a clean transfer. I stared at the screen for several minutes, trying to slow the rush of blood pounding in my ears. And then I saw something else, something that made my skin crawl. The notary's stamp and signature? It belonged to someone I knew, Lillian Garcia. She used to work for my dad's company, back when he still ran the family-owned real estate office. I met her once, years ago, at a barbecue. She retired the same summer that document was dated. Suddenly, Nathan's words rang louder than ever. You don't know everything, Kevin. Because now, it wasn't just about shady family politics. It looked like actual forgery, a retired notary, a deed filed quietly, and a transfer that directly violated Grandpa's will. I forwarded the PDF to Maya right away. She called me within minutes. This isn't just suspicious, she said. If this document was filed without proper disclosures, or if the notary didn't actually witness the signing, that's criminal. And if your dad used his company's resources to push it through, we might be looking at more than civil court. This could go federal. I didn't know whether to feel vindicated or sick. That night, I got another message, this time a voicemail from Nathan. But he didn't sound angry. He sounded calm. Too calm. Hey, he said. So, you've probably seen some things by now. Just letting you know, before you go playing hero, you're not the only one with something to lose here. Think real hard before you take this public. Family secrets don't stay secret forever. And then he hung up. I sat there, frozen, the words echoing in my mind like thunder. You're not the only one with something to lose. That's when I realized. Nathan wasn't just afraid of losing the house. He was afraid of what I'd find next. And I had no idea what that might be. I didn't sleep that night. I paced the living room for hours, turning his words over in my mind, listening to the voicemail again and again. You're not the only one with something to lose. I kept asking myself, what did he mean by that? What secret could possibly be worse than fraudulently taking ownership of the house? And why was he sounding so confident, even smug? By morning, I had a theory. It wasn't just about the house. It was never just about the house. It was about what they were trying to hide, and what they thought I'd never discover if I stayed in the role they'd always assigned me, the outsider, the ATM, the good son, who didn't make trouble. But that guy was gone. I wanted answers. I called Maya first thing, told her about the voicemail. She paused. Then she said something I didn't expect. Kevin, is it possible they're trying to scare you off because there's something else tied to that house? I blinked. Like what? She hesitated, then asked, have you ever seen the full property history? I hadn't. I mean, it was Grandpa's house. Always had been. I grew up there. Played in that creaky attic. Dug holes in the backyard looking for pirate treasure. It never crossed my mind that there could be more to the story. Maya offered to pull the records. An hour later, she sent me a file, and that's when everything snapped into place. My grandfather hadn't bought that house. He'd inherited it from his sister. Her name was Lorraine Mitchell, and she passed in 1974 under what the record vaguely referred to as unusual circumstances. There was a single obituary archived online. It read like a puff piece. A kind, soft-spoken woman who adored her garden and taught Sunday school. Never married. No children. The property passed to her brother, my grandfather, within the same month. That should have been it. Except, Maya found something buried in the property's deed history. A contested claim from 1975, filed by a man named Emery Grant. He claimed to be Lorraine's fiancé and stated in the filing that Lorraine had intended to leave the property to him in her will. The court dismissed it due to lack of documentation, and the claim was buried under decades of newer filings. But something about that detail stuck with me. Why would a man claim that, go to court over it, and just vanish? So I dug. I spent 2 full days glued to my screen, bouncing between archived newspaper clippings, old real estate transfer logs, and anything else I could find. And then I found the first real crack in the story. A 1973 article from a small local paper. Police called to 112 Reading Avenue after noise complaint. No charges filed. That was the address of our family house. And the man who made the complaint? Emery Grant. Now I was in it. Deep. This wasn't just about stolen property anymore. There was a real, buried scandal here. A forgotten one. A hidden piece of my family's past they never intended to come to light. And the deeper I went, the more twisted it got. According to local land survey records, the property had a sublot, technically a second parcel that was willed to Lorraine separately from the main house. It was a garden lot and used for decades. But it was still active, still in the family name. And when Maya looked up who'd signed the last update to that title in 2019, it wasn't Grandpa. It was Nathan. I stared at the record, numb. He hadn't just stolen the house. He'd quietly acquired ownership of the entire property, including the forgotten lot tied to Lorraine's name. The one no one else seemed to remember. Why? What was he planning to do with it? Maya ran a title scan. Turns out, Nathan had used that lot as collateral to secure another loan last year. A large one, nearly $200,000. Not for a home, but for business development. We kept digging, and then Maya found something that made my blood run cold. 2 weeks ago, a commercial zoning request had been filed for the property. Nathan wanted to sell the lot to a private developer. And guess who that developer was? My father. They were trying to flip it. Quietly. Illegally. All under the radar. They had no right to it. None. But they were leveraging its value, pretending the estate was fully under Nathan's control. That was the missing piece. That was why they were so desperate for me to co-sign his mortgage. They needed legitimacy. They needed my name to disappear off any claims before the paperwork got reviewed. Because once a zoning change is public, people notice. Lawsuits happen. And if my name was still connected to the will, the trust, anything, the deal would collapse. This wasn't just entitlement. It was calculated theft. I sat in silence for a long time after that. Not because I was unsure, but because I was angry. I wasn't a fighter by nature. I'd spent most of my life being the peacekeeper, the one who walked away. But this time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was defending what was stolen from me. From my grandfather. From Lorraine. On January 4th, I filed a fraud claim with the county. Submitted all the records Maya and I had collected. I formally contested the quitclaim deed. Filed a request to have the commercial zoning application frozen until an ownership hearing could be held. I even reached out to a historical preservation group, hoping they'd take an interest in the old garden lot and delay any commercial development. The fallout came fast. Nathan tried to play it cool at first. Sent me a short, sarcastic email. You really went full lawyer on us, huh? Good luck proving anything. But that tone didn't last. Because 2 days later, he received a cease and desist order. The zoning board was reviewing the fraud claims. The bank began an audit on his mortgage paperwork. My father's development company was slapped with an injunction. And just like that, the empire they built on lies began to crack. I didn't go to the next family gathering. I heard from a cousin that Christmas was awkward. Mom cried. Dad ranted. Nathan left early. No one talked about me. I didn't care. By March, a judge had reviewed the estate documentation and ruled that the transfer was invalid. The will had been violated. The trust had been bypassed without consent. The house and the garden lot were returned to joint ownership between me and Nathan. But I wasn't done. I gave Nathan a choice. Sell me his half at market value, cleanly, legally, permanently, or I'd push for criminal charges. He didn't even hesitate. He needed the cash. His mortgage was collapsing. His reputation was tanking. And our father? He quietly stepped down from his company within the month. No announcement. No party. Just a slow, silent retreat. I bought him out. Paid him exactly what his share was worth, not a cent more. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I moved in. I renovated the attic. Replanted the garden. Added a plaque out back, for Lorraine. whose story was never lost, just hidden. And then I changed the locks. My parents haven't spoken to me since. Sometimes I wonder if they ever really knew me. If they ever saw me as more than just the kid who never needed help, who made things easier for everyone by not needing anything at all. But now, I don't wonder what I could have done differently. Because for once, I chose myself. And I have no regrets. I've never been big on birthdays. Not because I don't like getting older or eating cake. I actually love cake. But because every year, it's a reminder of the pecking order in my family. And for as long as I can remember, I've been firmly at the bottom. My name's Evan. I'm 26 now, but the story I want to tell started when I was 25, just last year. I don't know what your family's like, but mine? My dad runs things like a Fortune 500 CEO, and we're all just departments under his thumb. My mom passed away when I was 13, and ever since then, it's been just the three of us. My dad, my younger sister Kayla, and me. Kayla's 22, fresh out of college, and she's always been the future. Dad's words, not mine. Growing up, I didn't resent her. Not really. She was the baby of the family, and after Mom died, Dad started coddling her like she was made of glass. She'd cry, and suddenly rules didn't apply. She'd pout, and Dad would hand her whatever she wanted. Meanwhile, I was expected to man up. I remember once in high school, I broke my wrist during football practice, and Dad told me to stop being dramatic because Kayla had a hard week. That kind of thing. It wasn't malicious, at least not at first. Just imbalanced. But as we got older, the imbalance grew into something bigger. Something uglier. By the time I graduated college, Dad had roped me into working for the family business, a moderately successful logistics company he'd started back in the 90s. Nothing glamorous, but steady. I started at the bottom, willingly. I didn't want handouts. I built software tools to improve scheduling, streamlined the invoicing process, negotiated better vendor contracts. The kind of stuff that made things run smoother without fanfare. I wasn't chasing praise, just results. Dad never said thank you. Not once. But he'd brag to his friends at dinner parties about how the company practically runs itself now. Sure, Dad. Like magic. Kayla, on the other hand, bounced between passions. First she was going to be a fashion designer, then a travel influencer, then a wellness coach. Dad funded every new phase. Bought her a professional camera for her YouTube channel that lasted 2 months. Flew her to Bali for a content retreat with other influencers. When that fizzled out, he paid for her to take a 6-month self-discovery trip through Europe. She came back with a boyfriend from Amsterdam and a new plan to launch her own boutique line of eco-friendly luggage. Guess who covered the startup costs? Now, don't get me wrong. I wanted Kayla to succeed. I wasn't rooting against her. But every time she stumbled, Dad would throw money at her like it was Monopoly cash, while I was working 70-hour weeks, keeping his company afloat with nothing more than the occasional grunt of approval. I hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years. I hadn't even taken a sick day. When I got COVID, I worked from home with a fever. Dad said, "That's the kind of dedication this family needs." I thought maybe, just maybe, he meant it. Then came the birthday that flipped the switch. It was mid-October. Kayla's birthday. Dad always threw big parties for her, catered events, live music, custom cakes with little fondant purses or miniature Eiffel Towers, depending on her current obsession. This year, it was at a rooftop venue downtown, all string lights and champagne flutes, and a private DJ playing what sounded like a Spotify playlist titled Rich Girl Vibes. I wasn't surprised. I showed up in a button-down and slacks straight from the office. Everyone else looked like they were going to a fashion gala. The whole night felt like a performance. Guests fawned over Kayla, who wore a white silk dress and made sure everyone knew it was custom-made by a Milanese designer she met during her last trip. Dad was beaming. I stood near the back, nursing a drink and avoiding small talk. Eventually, the cake came out. People gathered. Dad clinked his glass. He gave a speech, of course. He always gave speeches, but this one hit different. "She's the future of this family," he said, raising his glass to Kayla. "A visionary. A creator. Someone who doesn't just follow paths. She makes them. I've never been prouder." The crowd clapped. Kayla smiled like she was accepting an Oscar. I waited for him to pivot, to say something like, "And let's not forget Evan, who's been working hard behind the scenes." But he didn't. He just moved on. That was it. Later, when things died down, Dad pulled out a set of keys and handed them to Kayla. "It's waiting outside," he said. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." She squealed, hugged him, and ran off with a few of her friends to see her gift, a brand new Audi, parked in front with a bow on it. I watched through the window as she jumped up and down like a teenager. Then Dad turned to me. "You should think about working harder," he said, not unkindly. "You've hit a bit of a plateau. Don't get comfortable." He reached into his pocket and handed me a small box. I opened it. It was a silver keychain shaped like a gear. On the back, it read, "Grind now, shine later." I stared at it for a second. Then I looked at him. "That's your birthday gift?" asked someone nearby. Dad laughed. "Well, it's motivational. That's worth more than a car, right?" Everyone chuckled. I didn't. I just nodded, slipped the box into my pocket, and walked outside for air. In that moment, something clicked in me. Something that had been cracking quietly for years, but finally snapped. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just hollow. Like I'd finally realized the truth I didn't want to admit. No matter how much I gave, it was never going to be enough. Not for him. Not compared to her. And that was the night I decided I was done. Not just with the party. Not just with my dad's empty gestures. I was done being the silent engine behind his empire. I was done being invisible. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't make a scene. I just slipped out the back, went home, and spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the ways I'd propped up a man who saw me as a spare part in a machine he didn't understand. The next morning, I walked into the office, cleared my desk, and left a resignation letter in his top drawer. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't answer when he called the next day, or the day after that. I disappeared, and let the cracks I'd been patching for years finally start to show. That was just the beginning. What happened next? Well, let's just say the house of cards came down faster than I ever expected. But I'll get to that. The silence after I left was louder than I expected. Not literal silence. My phone buzzed plenty the first week. Missed calls. A few messages from Dad that swung between confused and condescending. One just said, "If you're having a midlife crisis at 25, you should talk to someone. You're needed here." Another read, "Kayla says you're being dramatic." I agree. Let's talk like men. I didn't reply. Not once. I'd spent too long pretending this was normal. Pretending I was just being sensitive. That if I worked harder, longer, better, maybe I'd earn the basic recognition I gave up on asking for years ago. But after that birthday party, something in me shifted. I stopped craving his approval. Stopped chasing the idea that if I just stayed loyal enough, I'd finally be treated like I mattered. But I won't lie and say it was easy. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waking up to a packed calendar or back-to-back calls. No emails to answer, no fires to put out. Just quiet. At first, it was disorienting. I walked around my apartment like a stranger in my own life, uncertain whether I'd made a mistake. But then I started breathing again. And sleeping. Like actually sleeping. Meanwhile, I heard murmurs from a few coworkers I still had on LinkedIn. Whispers of invoices going unpaid, missed shipments, clients growing restless. I watched from a distance as the tiny machine I'd kept oiled began to stutter and stall. I didn't feel guilty, just numb. Like I'd stepped away from a sinking ship I'd spent years trying to plug with my bare hands. A few weeks passed. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Porter, one of our oldest and most important clients. He didn't know I'd left. Thought I was still running logistics. Said he'd been trying to reach the office for days, but kept getting vague promises and no follow-through. He sounded frustrated, tired. Said, "You're the only one who ever knew what was going on over there, Evan. Did something happen?" I told him, gently, that I didn't work there anymore. He went quiet. Then he sighed. "Well," he said, "that explains a lot." It felt like someone had just put words to everything I'd been feeling. But even as the cracks in the company widened, Dad didn't back down. If anything, he doubled down on Kayla. She announced on Instagram that her eco-luggage brand was finally launching. The pictures were polished, the captions full of words like sustainable, innovative, and visionary. She posted videos of herself unboxing samples, explaining her creative journey, and doing photo shoots with pastel suitcases and flower fields. I watched it all with a strange mix of detachment and disbelief. I knew how the business was really doing. I knew Dad had diverted a chunk of the company's operating budget to fund Kayla's startup. He wasn't being subtle about it, either. A former coworker forwarded me an internal memo that said budget had been restructured to prioritize long-term family investments. Whatever that meant. Still, I said nothing. Let it all unravel. But the moment that really pushed things over the edge The true breaking point came a month later. It was early December, cold and gray, and I was visiting Mom's grave. I did it every year, same day, same time. Quietly. No fanfare. She'd passed away on December 5th when I was 13, and even though we never made a big deal out of it, I always felt like she deserved a moment. I brought flowers. Sat there for a while, just thinking. Then, out of nowhere, Kayla showed up. I didn't even hear her heels crunching through the frosted grass until she was a few feet away. "Oh," she said, spotting me. "Didn't expect you here." She was wearing a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than my car and oversized sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. I stood up, brushing dirt from my jeans. "Why wouldn't I be here?" I asked. "It's Mom's anniversary." She tilted her head, as if that hadn't occurred to her. "Right? Yeah, I just thought. You know, since you've been off the grid, or whatever." "I took a break," I said. "Didn't realize that made me a ghost." She smirked. "Dad thinks you're being immature." I didn't answer. She stepped closer to the headstone, pulling a phone from her pocket. "I'm just stopping by for a photo," she said, flipping her hair. "Posting something about Mom. The engagement last year was insane." I blinked. "Wait, you're taking a picture?" "Yeah, duh." She crouched down, angling her phone toward the headstone. "It's for the brand. Like, grounding myself. Reminding people I've had struggles too. That kind of thing." I stared at her. "You're using our mom's grave for clout." Kayla looked up, annoyed. "Don't be so dramatic. It's storytelling. People relate to grief." I opened my mouth, then closed it. I didn't trust myself to speak. She took a few shots, filtered them, then stood and turned to me. "Anyway, you should talk to Dad. He's stressed. I think he's hoping you'll come crawling back soon." "Not happening." She shrugged. "Suit yourself. But, since you're not doing anything, maybe you could help pack some orders for my luggage line? It's been overwhelming lately." I actually laughed. Out loud. A short, bitter sound. "What?" she asked. "You really don't get it, do you?" I said. She frowned. "Get what?" "That I'm done. With you. With Dad. With all of it." Kayla rolled her eyes. "So you're gonna sulk forever because you didn't get a car for your birthday? Grow up." I walked past her without another word. She called after me. "You know, maybe if you weren't so obsessed with being a martyr all the time, people would actually want to help you." I didn't look back. Later that night, I got a call from Dad. I let it ring. Then another. Finally, a message came through, just one line. "Need you to come in tomorrow. We need to talk." Seriously. I ignored it. But curiosity got the better of me the next morning. I took a walk past the office, just to see. It was mid-morning, but the parking lot was half empty. Through the glass doors, I spotted two receptionists whispering at the front desk. The place looked off. Not frantic, not chaotic, just confused. Like a machine missing its core piece. That night, Dad showed up at my apartment. I hadn't seen him in person since Kayla's birthday. He looked different. More tired. A little grayer. "Evan," he said when I opened the door. "Can we talk?" I didn't invite him in. Just leaned against the frame. "I'll keep it short," he said. "The company's struggling." I waited. "We've lost 3 major clients. Deadlines are being missed. There are issues with cash flow. It's temporary. But I could use your help getting things back on track." I almost laughed again. "Temporary?" I asked. "Or the result of pulling funds to pay for luggage prototypes and influencers?" He stiffened. "That's irrelevant." "No," I said. "That's exactly the problem. You gambled the company on Kayla's latest identity crisis." He bristled. "Kayla is trying to build something. So was I." I said, my voice sharp now. "But you never gave a damn about that. You only saw what she could become, not what I already was." He shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "This isn't about favoritism, isn't it?" I asked, stepping closer. "When she got a car, and I got a lecture. When she got a team, and I got told to grind harder. When she gets to post about grief, and I'm expected to quietly clean up everyone's messes." Dad didn't respond. "I'm not coming back," I said finally. "Not to save your business. Not to patch your mistakes. And definitely not to help Kayla ship pastel suitcases to influencers in Malibu." His jaw clenched. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "I finally stopped making them." He stood there for a long moment, then turned and walked away. I shut the door and stood in the hallway, heart pounding. That was the night I decided to stop waiting for an apology and start planning something else. Something bigger. Because watching them scramble was satisfying, but I wasn't done yet. Not even close. I'd love to say I felt triumphant after that night, that telling my dad off in the hallway of my apartment gave me some deep catharsis. But the truth? I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what came next. For the first time in years, I had no paycheck, no backup plan, no real direction. Just a hollow victory and a head full of emotions I'd been bottling up since I was a teenager. In a weird way, that was my rock bottom. Not the confrontation itself, but the silence that came after. The realization that I'd walked away from everything I knew without a clear destination. The kind of freefall that feels empowering in movies but terrifying in real life. My savings weren't infinite, and the rent on my apartment wasn't cheap. The family business had always been my world, not just my job, but my structure. Without it, my days blurred together. I tried applying for jobs in logistics, but every time I sat down to write a cover letter, I felt this ache in my chest. I wasn't ready to jump back into the same world, not under someone else's thumb, and definitely not to rebuild someone else's dream. I started going for long walks in the morning, just to feel like I had somewhere to be. There's something about walking alone in the cold that forces you to think. No distractions, just breath and footsteps. It was during one of those walks that I passed an old warehouse that had been for sale for months. It wasn't anything special, rusted shutters, cracked windows, weeds in the parking lot, but something about it caught my eye. I don't know what possessed me to look it up later that day, but I did. The price was surprisingly low, probably because it was zoned in a light industrial area most people didn't want to touch. I laughed at first, then stared at the listing, then laughed again. Then I didn't stop thinking about it. You know those quiet moments when something clicks and you can't explain why. That warehouse became an obsession. I started sketching out ideas in a notebook I hadn't touched in years. Ideas I'd pushed aside because I was too busy or too committed to the family business. But now I wasn't either of those things. Now I was just Evan, broke, unemployed, and weirdly excited. I didn't buy the warehouse, not yet. But I filed an LLC. I called it Cornerstone. Not flashy, not trendy. Just solid. Then I reached out to a few old clients I had good relationships with. Not to steal them. I wasn't trying to gut my dad's business. I just wanted to ask questions. What did they wish logistics companies did better? Where were their biggest frustrations? What problems were they still trying to solve? To my surprise, they answered. Not just politely, enthusiastically. One even said, "Honestly, if you ever start something on your own, call me." You were the only one who actually understood how to fix things instead of just talking about them. That stuck with me. So I started working. Slowly, quietly. I didn't have funding or a team, but I had a laptop, a vision, and time. All the things I'd never had when I was buried in someone else's priorities. I built a new kind of logistics model. Leaner, tech-forward, focused on small and mid-sized businesses that got ignored by the giants. I designed it to be flexible, personalized. I wanted every client to feel like they were the only one on the roster. I spent the next few months living frugally. No more takeout, no more Friday night drinks, no new clothes. Just sweat, planning, and code. I converted my second bedroom into a makeshift office and set rigid hours for myself. I wasn't working for my dad anymore, but I wasn't going to slack off. This time, it was for me. I launched the Cornerstone beta in late spring. Quietly. No press, no grand opening. No dramatic social media post. Just a handful of early clients and a promise. We'll handle the heavy lifting. You focus on what you do best. And people responded. Not in droves, but enough. Enough to pay the bills. Enough to breathe again. A month in, I got an email from Mr. Porter, the old client who'd called me during the first wave of my absence. He said he'd heard I was back in the game and asked if I'd be interested in taking on one of his new contracts. I was. That contract turned into 2, then 4. Cornerstone wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral. But it worked because I worked. Because I cared. And because I knew what it felt like to be treated like a cog instead of a person. For the first time in my adult life, I felt proud of something that had my name on it. Meanwhile, I heard things about my dad's company. Through the grapevine, mostly. More clients dropping. Staff leaving. Something about a bad shipment deal in Chicago that cost them thousands. Kayla's luggage line quietly shuddered. Apparently, she never figured out the actual supply chain side of things and didn't want to deal with the boring back end. Last I saw, her Instagram had shifted to self-growth content and inspirational quotes over filtered sunsets. I didn't celebrate their failures, but I didn't mourn them either. One morning in July, I got a call from my cousin Leo. He used to work in sales at my dad's company, but had quit a few weeks after I did. You free for lunch? He asked. I have a story you're going to want to hear. We met at a tiny sandwich place near my apartment. Leo looked tired, but relieved. They're hemorrhaging, he said, biting into a meatball sub. Like full-on spiral. Your dad's been trying to act like it's just a rough quarter, but the books are brutal. Half the office knows it's only a matter of time. I nodded, sipping my coffee. I figured as much. But that's not the story, he added. You'll love this part. He leaned in. Your dad had a meeting with the bank last week, trying to renegotiate some loans. He brought Kayla. I raised an eyebrow. She tried to pitch herself as a co-CEO, Leo said, grinning. Talked about her visionary leadership and creative brand synergy. The banker asked her to explain the company's quarterly losses, and she just froze, completely blank. Then started talking about TikTok trends. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Hard. Leo chuckled too, then sobered. Honestly, I think he thought you'd come back by now. That you'd bail him out again. He doesn't know what to do without you. That hit deeper than I expected. He ever talk about me? I asked. Leo paused. Not much. But when he does, it's weird. Like he doesn't get it. Still thinks you're just being stubborn or taking things too personally. Like he never put the pieces together. I nodded slowly. That tracked. Dad didn't deal in reflection. Only projection. After lunch, I walked back home and sat at my desk, staring at the growing client list on my screen. It felt surreal. Just a year ago, I was invisible in my own family. Now I had something real. Something mine. But the thing that surprised me most? I didn't feel angry anymore. Not numb. Not bitter. Just detached. Like I'd finally stepped out of a storm I didn't realize I'd been living in for years. The company was doing well. I'd hired my first part-time assistant, a sharp, detail-oriented guy named Malik who reminded me of myself at 22. I told him, you won't go unnoticed here. Ever. And I meant it. I wasn't rich. Not even close. But I was stable. And every contract I signed, every system I built, every client who said, you actually listen, was another brick in the foundation I never thought I'd have. The rise wasn't dramatic. There was no movie montage or viral moment. Just grit, focus, and quiet victories. But honestly, that made it sweeter. Because it was real. Because it was mine. I still hadn't spoken to my dad since that night at the apartment. But that was about to change. Because one morning, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A printed letter. In a manila envelope. Hand-delivered. It was from my father's lawyer. And it wasn't an invitation to talk. It was a request. No, a plea. And what it said inside made my stomach drop. The envelope was thick. Heavier than you'd expect for a simple letter, with my name typed neatly on the front. No return address. No branding. Just a single word in the bottom corner. Confidential. I stared at it for a long time before I opened it. Something about the way it was hand-delivered unsettled me. This wasn't a casual note. This was orchestrated. Deliberate. A move. Inside was a neatly typed document on legal letterhead from my father's longtime attorney, Charles Wexler. A man I'd only met once, years ago, during a client dinner where he spoke more like a PR rep than a lawyer. The letter opened formally, as if this was just a matter of professional interest. Dear Mr. Evan Price, I am writing on behalf of your father, Mr. Raymond Price, regarding an urgent matter pertaining to the continued viability of PriceLogix Inc. Due to a series of unfortunate financial downturns, Mr. Price is requesting a confidential meeting with you to discuss a potential strategic partnership or transitional advisory role within the company. The meeting is proposed for Thursday, 11 a.m., at the Wexler & Associates offices. This conversation will remain strictly off-record unless mutually agreed otherwise. Please RSVP no later than Tuesday at 4 p.m. Best regards, Charles Wexler, ESQ. I let the letter fall onto my kitchen table and just sat there. A strategic partnership? After a year of silence, after I'd walked away with nothing, after he'd doubled down on Kayla and all but pretended I never existed. Now he wanted my help? No, not just help. A private meeting. A plea for assistance disguised as a business transaction. I should have thrown it away, but I didn't. I spent the rest of that day pacing around my apartment. Not angry, just calculating. Because here's the thing about someone like my father. When he gets desperate, he gets sloppy. And if he was sending letters through his lawyer instead of picking up the phone himself, it meant he'd already burned his last match. This wasn't just a business problem anymore. It was survival. And somewhere along the line, the man who used to make me feel like I owed him my entire future now found himself on the edge, and I was the only person left with the tools to fix it. But I wasn't going to fix it. I was going to end it. Not with a tantrum. Not with some flashy revenge stunt. No, with precision. With leverage. With finality. I pulled out the old notebooks I'd used in the early planning days of Cornerstone. Tucked between budgeting spreadsheets and vendor lists were notes I'd made in the months after leaving PriceLogix. Scattered thoughts about client complaints, internal weaknesses, regulatory risks Dad had ignored for years. Things I'd once jotted down just to get them out of my head. Now they looked like blueprints. Over the next 2 days, I pieced together everything I knew. I made lists. Vendors he underpaid. Clients he overpromised. Employees he bullied. Government contracts that had lapsed. A warehouse lease in Tulsa that was being paid double market rate, probably due to some backdoor deal with a contractor friend of his. Every page I turned reminded me how long I'd kept that sinking ship afloat. I started making calls. Not malicious ones, not yet. Just quiet check-ins. First, to Malik. How do you feel about expanding operations? I asked. He was thrilled. Said he'd been waiting for the green light. Then to Mr. Porter. Hypothetically, I said, if PriceLogix was on the verge of collapse, would you consider transitioning the rest of your logistics work to Cornerstone? Yesterday, he replied. By Wednesday morning, I had a list of clients who'd already peeled off from my father's company, and a second list of those who were looking for the exit door if only someone pointed the way. I compiled all of it into a folder labeled ACE in the hole. Then I confirmed the meeting. Wexler's office was in a downtown tower with mirrored windows and an air of old money. I dressed simple, dark blazer, no tie, clean shaven. I wanted to look like someone you'd take seriously, but not someone trying to impress you. The receptionist smiled, buzzed me in, and directed me to a long, glass-walled conference room. Dad was already inside. He stood when I walked in, an old habit, one of the few manners he'd never shed. He looked thinner, paler. His suit hung on him like it was a size too big. For the first time in my life, my father looked tired. Evan, he said, nodding. Thanks for coming. I didn't respond, just sat down across from him. Wexler followed close behind, briefcase in hand. Let's get started, gentlemen. They launched into a presentation, more of a plea dressed in bullet points. Revenue decline, 38%. Client retention, down 24%. 2 warehouse managers had quit in the past month. Their primary software was outdated, buggy, and I knew exactly why. I'd built half of it. The guy they'd hired after me tried to modernize things by rewriting core scheduling logic. It broke the back end, caused cascading failures, and now shipments were disappearing into black holes of pending dispatch. By the time they finished their pitch, I hadn't said a single word. Wexler folded his hands. Your father is offering a limited-time equity package, should you agree to come on in a transitional executive role. No, I said. Dad blinked. You haven't heard the offer yet. I don't need to. He sat back, mouth tight. I pulled out the folder. I brought something too. Inside were 2 neatly stacked documents. The first was a list of every known client I had proof was already shopping for alternatives. The second was a proposed partnership outline, not for PriceLogix, but for acquiring its remaining assets under a Cornerstone expansion. Dad stared at the pages for a long time. What is this? He asked. A lifeboat, I said. For the parts worth saving. The brand's done. The leadership's a joke. But the infrastructure? The warehouses? The logistics network? That has value. And I've built a better system to manage it. He didn't respond. Just sat there, nostrils flaring. Wexler leaned forward, scanning the top page. So you're proposing a hostile acquisition? No, I said calmly. Hostile would be me calling every one of your vendors and clients tomorrow and telling them how unstable your operations are. This is mercy. Dad's eyes locked on mine. You think you can take what I built, he hissed. I already did, I said. You just haven't accepted it yet. The room went silent. Eventually, Wexler cleared his throat. We'll review and respond within 72 hours. I nodded. That's generous. But the offer expires in 48. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked out without looking back. Outside, the air felt cooler. Lighter. It was the first time I'd ever truly felt taller than my father. The next 48 hours were a blur of calls, contracts, and contingencies. I didn't know how he'd respond. I honestly expected rage, retaliation, maybe even an attempt to smear me in the industry. But what came next surprised me more than anything he'd ever done. And that is when the real game began. He didn't respond within 48 hours. That, in itself, told me everything. My father was many things: proud, egotistical, commanding, but above all else, he was stubborn. I knew he would wait past the deadline just to see if I'd flinch. He'd always believed he was the immovable object, and that the rest of us were meant to revolve around him. What he didn't understand, what he never understood, was that I'd already moved on. The moment I walked out of that birthday party, I stopped orbiting his world. And by the time I made the offer in Wexler's conference room, it wasn't a negotiation. It was a courtesy. So when the 48 hours passed without so much as a call, I didn't wait. I made my move. It started with a quiet press release from Cornerstone. Cornerstone Logistics is proud to announce the expansion of our client network and operations. Beginning this quarter, we will be onboarding 5 new major contracts from national retailers and distribution chains. We remain committed to delivering personalized, tech-forward logistics solutions with integrity and transparency. That press release hit just as PriceLogix's quarterly earnings were being whispered around industry circles. Everyone knew they were bleeding. Everyone knew they were vulnerable. I didn't mention their name. I didn't have to. The same afternoon, I launched a targeted digital campaign aimed at the businesses still working with my father. It wasn't aggressive, just factual. Testimonials from new clients. Case studies comparing delivery efficiency. A sleek side-by-side analysis showing how Cornerstone's systems outperformed the industry standard. I posted one case study in a private logistics forum, where I knew managers from 3 of Dad's warehouses still lurked. By Monday, I got an email from one of his regional directors. Would love to talk options. Quietly. By Wednesday, 3 more followed. By the end of the week, a full-time dispatcher who had trained under me, before Dad promoted a family friend over him, submitted a formal application to Cornerstone. In his cover letter, he wrote, "I always believed in your vision. Just needed a door." I gave him one. Behind the scenes, I was laying the real groundwork, not just for a takeover, but for a dismantling. Using public records and internal contacts, I traced the paper trail of PriceLogix's remaining warehouse leases. A few were locked into long-term agreements, but 2 of their best locations were coming up for renewal. I made a quiet offer to the property owner, slightly above market value, contingent on the current leaseholders not renewing. He accepted. Just business. The following month, PriceLogix tried to renew both locations. Their applications were rejected. No explanation given. One of the properties was officially transferred to Cornerstone Logistics within 14 days. They didn't see it coming. And that was just phase 1. Phase 2 was about the vendors. I reached out to the ones Dad had burned, the guys he'd underpaid, dismissed, or treated like disposable tools. I offered better terms, clearer contracts, a commitment to fairness. Word traveled fast. In logistics, reputation is currency. And for years, PriceLogix had been coasting on old relationships I'd personally nurtured. Without me, those ties had frayed. Now they snapped. By mid-August, one of their longest-standing clients, a regional food distributor worth 7 figures in annual shipments, announced they were terminating their agreement. The press release cited inconsistencies in service and a desire for greater transparency. The next day, they signed with Cornerstone. That was the moment I knew the revenge had landed. Not as a firestorm, not as a headline, but as a quiet death. My father's company, the empire he built, the throne he ruled from, was collapsing in on itself. Not because I sabotaged it, but because he never knew how to keep it alive without me. And now the industry knew it, too. I didn't hear from him again until late September. It came in the form of a voicemail. His voice was flat, measured, like he was reading from a teleprompter in his head. "Evan, I heard about the contracts. About the leases. About the clients. You've made your point. I don't know if you feel proud of yourself, but I hope it was worth it." Then a pause. Just breathing. "You win." I played that message once, then deleted it. Because this was never about winning. Not really. It was about liberation. About finally stepping out from under the weight of a man who only valued control, and proving that I was never the failure he quietly feared I'd be. That his idea of the future of the family was nothing more than a fantasy built on favoritism and blind arrogance. Kayla faded from the picture not long after. Her luggage company had dissolved quietly over the summer. She posted a teary-eyed life update video about moving into a new phase of healing. Then she pivoted to wellness coaching, then travel blogging again, and eventually just stopped posting altogether. I didn't hate her. She was spoiled, yes, woefully blind. But she was raised in the same house I was, just on the opposite end of the seesaw. Dad gave her a pedestal before she ever had to earn a step. And in doing so, he broke both of us, just in different ways. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. Cornerstone kept growing. By winter, we'd expanded to a second state, opened 2 new fulfillment hubs, and crossed 7 figures in revenue. Not venture-backed, not celebrity-funded, just built the old-fashioned way, with work, trust, and consistency. One evening, I walked past a downtown wine bar and saw my dad sitting alone inside. Same gray suit, same slouch posture, just older now, smaller. He didn't see me. I stood there for a moment, watching him sip from a glass, staring at nothing. The same man who once toasted Kayla with "she's the future of this family" now sat in silence, the world no longer orbiting around him. And me? I walked past him, not out of spite, but out of peace, because I didn't need anything from him anymore. Not approval, not acknowledgement, not apologies. I already had everything he never gave me, and everything he tried to keep for himself. I had freedom, I had purpose, I had power, and I built it from the ground up, with nothing more than a silver keychain and a lifetime of being underestimated. That keychain still sits on my desk. I keep it there not as a reminder of the insult, but as a symbol of what happens when you stop grinding for someone else's dream and start building your own. Because the truth is, I didn't collapse when I walked away. They did, and I never looked back.